Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MTG Heritage event sponsored by Man Traders. I am your host, Mason Clark, joined by my co-host, Dom Harvey. Dom, are you excited today to get into some legacy with none of the BS? No Baldur's Gate, no Modern Horizons, just the way Garfield intended, standard supplementary products.
I'm very excited because I am a boomer, and as a boomer, the thing I like most is to complain and to wax nostalgia about how things used to be. This is the perfect venue to do that, and it's kind of an interesting setup we have here. So, as you mentioned, this is Legacy without any of the extra sets, because I think this is what is sparking a lot of the recent complaints about the state of the format. Is Legacy is where it's this dumping ground for everything that gets printed. So, if it's in a commander set, it's Legacy. If it's in Unfinity, it's one of the half of that set that's actually legal and not whatever, that's in Legacy. So stickers, attractions, all of that is fair game. So I think that is the recent impetus for some of those complaints that we've had. But in parallel, we have the past few years of mainstream standard pipeline cards that have affected Legacy the same way they've affected every other format. So we have our Okos and our Uros. I guess we don't have Oko anymore. We still have Uro kicking around, and we're going to see that maybe in our round one feature match here. And so this is really the test of who is the real culprit. Was it the Uro in the pantry with a candlestick, or was it something else? You know. And so yeah, this is Legacy without some of the nonsense and some of the BS, but maybe still a little bit of it for the people who like that.
Yeah, we were joking pre-show that there's a bunch of cards that you would think wouldn't be legal today, like Mystic Sanctuary, Expressive Iteration, Ura. Those are all legal today and will be a part of our tournament. We have multiple players playing those cards today. But there is a bunch of stuff that is gone. So we don't have to worry about Murktide. We don't have to worry about DRC. We don't have to worry about Allosaurus Shepherd out of the Elves deck. And so that really changes kind of what's going to be here without really making it too different from the legacy you kind of already know, and kind of showing that we have a list of the players deck here, and we're going to go over some of those here in just a little bit. But it's really interesting to see what the players come up with. And we know there's a lot of talk on social media before this event, like, is this event just going to be legacy from 2012 with a couple new cards added, or is this going to be like completely different? And I think there are some things that just weren't really huge players in the way that a lot of players today who are very strong players, and a lot of actually honestly our D&T experts came with decks that are back in the day kind of memes that they say, hey, the updates to these decks have made them real decks, and I'm excited to see how this play out today.
Yeah, you see some of that looking at our round one feature, which I believe is going to be Jerry Thompson, Pro Tour champion, decorated legacy boomer in his own right, here with his Sultai control deck, where I remember a decade ago watching Jerry slice through these Star City Games Legacy Opens on the Sundays with Shardless Bug, as it was called back in the day. Shardless Sultai, if you're my copy editor. But it turns out Shardless Patron, Baleful Strix, those are both from Chase, which falls under this umbrella of supplemental sets, and so neither of the cards legal in this tournament. So Jerry had to mix it up a little bit, but still some of his favorites from back in the day.
Yeah, the behind the scenes is I asked Jerry to play the tournament. He agreed, and then immediately goes, "Wait, Shardless isn't legal." And I was like, "You can't back out. Sorry." So that was like a different, because these, like you said, these are kind of his bread and butter, and this is what he really loves doing. And this was the thing that during that time period we talked about. There are cards that people don't really think about as cards that were kind of these real problems. Everyone thinks of Tuning Nemesis, but Baleful Strix is a huge part of Legacy in that time period. That gone, Jerry's had to go in some pretty unique new directions in order to answer stuff. And we see things like Assassin's Trophy, which is something that they can only dream of having back in 2012, and that's now in this deck as a really interesting catch-all.
Yeah, and you see this nice blend of old and new here. We have Hint of Chorak, a card that you really don't see that much actual Legacy in 2022, big fan favorite, big player back in the day, alongside Uro, the go-to control win condition, alongside Tarmogoyf, getting the job done as well. So I'm interested to see which parts of this deck seem to be doing the heavy lifting. If Jerry is able to repeat some of those performances from back in the day. And then his opponent here is Dougal Wabi, Dougal's on Twitch. You may recognize prominent Legacy streamer, joining us from Australia, where I believe it's 3 a.m. in the morning. So he's putting the commitment in. We salute him for even showing up today. And he's showing up with Maverick, a deck that he's well known for, that has a lot of favorites in the Legacy format. And the fact that Maverick in a form like this is realistically not that playable in Legacy anymore, that is a good encapsulation of how far the format has moved. And you look at that list there, you could have played that deck, aside from like the one questing beast, which we see in the opening hand here, you could have played most of this deck back in 2015, 2016. So we got some old school and some new school here.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see the sideboard stuff too when we get to, game 2 and 3 as well. A lot of really strong creatures have been printed in the last decade. That's probably the thing that's the most different between now and then that we're going to see. And so I'm really excited to see kind of, oh, how does the Maverick deck adapt post board with all these new toys I got? And we're starting off right away here with Maverick on the play. And, Dom, I'm no Maverick expert, but this seems like a great start, especially with an open decklist term like this. And your opponent, Jerry, is going to be having a lot of removal in his Sultai deck.
Yeah, it's one of those awkward hands that you get with some of these Green Sun Zenith decks where you drew the Dryad up, but that's not the zone where you want that card. You have what is effectively a one-lander with Birds of Paradise. If that dies, then you don't know if you're going to be casting your spell. So I understand why Doug would mulligan into a hand which is kind of the same thing but better. We still have that turn one Mother of Runes. We have that Sylvan Library, which used to be back in the day before NASA, before some of these other cards. That was the card that broke open these grindy mid-range control matchups.
100%. And yeah, this is why he's a Maverick expert. I'm not. I would have kept that hand and been like, whatever, how many fatal pushes can Jerry really have, But, we had a much better start here. And we see Jerry just right away answering the mom, showing a lot of respect for that classic card.
And you have to do that because if you don't push that turn one mom, you're not pushing anything else. The mother's going to protect itself or protect whatever other thing you target with it. And so the mom, even though it died on turn one, it's kind of done its job because it cleared the way for this Knight of the Reliquary, which is going to force another answer from Jerry if he has one, put him to the test in that regard.
Yeah, and we see Jerry here. I was about to make a comment about how maybe Daze is the real culprit with all these BS cards we keep talking about for the tournament. But Jerry is just like, whatever. I have Assassin's Trophy. I have other things. I don't need to worry about this Sylvan Library. I have bigger plans for my Daze, which is really interesting and exciting to see. It's kind of a cool start to the tournament.
Yeah, an awkward mana situation for Jerry. Tropical Island with him to talk, so a little conflict there. And Jerry knows, he's been on the right end of this before. He knows how important that Sylvan Library is. So using that Assassin's Trophy, and so 2 removal spells down in the first turns. Currently, nothing to deal with that night, except for that Daze, which is going to tag it for free. And you're going to see, I think, why Daze is so important in Legacy, going back 15 years or more now.
Yeah, and we're also seeing the interesting things we haven't seen much in Legacy, right? Like Assassin's Trophy plus Daze, both powerful cards, a little bit of a nombo though, right? Like it gives you a land, makes it so you can actually play around Daze a little bit. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how we're gonna try and navigate between this wide array of removal spells that Jerry's presenting.
Yeah, and yeah, this is the thing. You see Woodford Hills providing this implicit protection from the Daze for the night. We also have a Wasteland, which, given Jerry's situation at the moment, that might just be the thing that ends the game in the next turn cycle or two.
Yeah, it looks like, Jerry here maybe have to take one of those risky brainstorms we all had to do in the past, right? Where it's like, well, I don't really know what else I can do, so let's draw a card, hope it works out. And it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how he navigates through here because Jerry also, has a card like Shark Typhoon, which, given enough time, will be like a pretty reasonable threat. And, our Maverick player here is already low on resources. So, we just need to figure out how to answer this one night, and we might be in this driver's seat.
Yeah, this is the last threat that Doug has at the moment. And Maverick, a deck that's going to have some good top decks from this spot. Zenith, another night, lots of ways to get back in. But there's going to be a big difference on this turn between untapping with that night and having it die to, yet another removal spell here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't see Jerry's full hand on the brainstorm, but it looks like we did hit some lands, so the game keeps going. And Tarmogoyf. That is a pretty good one when it comes to blocking.
Yeah,
that's true.
Tarmogoyf is the bridge between the boomer and just about clinging on to relevance in modern and Legacy and so on. Even in contemporary Legacy, you don't see the card that often, but it's going to be good enough to get the job done here potentially.
Yeah, for sure. Just an all-timer. And we see Jerry just being like, okay, well, let's him to Rock, let's make sure you're top decking, and then I'll try and work on stabilizing from there. And spoiler alert, Doug's like, cool, +2/+2, time to get into combat, So it's gonna be interesting to see kind of if Jerry can find a way to stabilize with this Knight of the Reliquary, because it is already presenting, a 3-turn clock here in combination with the Dried Arbor.
Worth noting as well that this night, there's no Jerry step in the deck. So the knight can't protect itself or offer protection to anything else. The knight is either this gigantic basic, which the Nile Spellbomb in Jerry's hand will be able to shrink a bit, or it can maybe search up some utility lands. If Doug smells blood and wants to search up a wasteland to continue attacking Jerry's mana, he could do that. So we'll see what approach this Maverick expert takes in this game here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When it comes to like playing Maverick versus the control decks, are you kind of wanting to play the game a little bit longer because your deck can grind, Dom? Or do you find yourself kind of like, hey, if I have something like a Neither Reliquary here, I kind of want to try and get the game over with sooner than later.
I think the nice thing about both of these decks in the context of their respective legacy formats is that they are pretty flexible in that regard. So the Maverick deck can play these 10, 15 turn games if it needs to, can also turn the corner very quickly with a gigantic Knight, which seems to be the angle that we're going to see. The Knight in the short term, searching up a wasteland, depriving Jerry of mana. And I think the Mother of Runes is a big part of that puzzle. I think Doug knows that if he can untap with the Knight, he can potentially thread that sequence turn after turn, just cut off Jerry's ability to participate in the game, and then with the game with that massive Knight at his leisure.
Yeah. And we saw Doug, like, hey, I'm the legacy Maverick expert. We're going to go a little long. So it's kind of an interesting approach here. And we're going to have to see. I mean, drawing Punishing Fire, I think traditionally in this matchup, it's kind of like, oh, this isn't great, but at least Baleful Strix is taken care of. But, like we mentioned now, that's not in Jerry's deck. Jerry's end game looks much more like Uro and stuff like that. And he's using Tarmogoyf to survive the mid game, where Baleful Strix would maybe be in that role before. So definitely going to be like kind of a different, like you have to update your priors in this matchup from like, like not the best draw I've ever had, but I've had worse, to yikes, this really is just a shock.
Yeah, if you think about the incremental advantage or the lock that's threatened by that Punishing Fire, Grove of the Bone combo, it just looks so wimpy next to an Uro that's attacking and getting 3 life and drawing cards every turn. And you see how just the rate on these new cards has edged out some of these former staples. The interesting blend of the old and the new in this game. Tarmogoyf with Shark Typhoon, this enchantment that gets itself in your graveyard at instant speed. Almost a combat trick of sorts with the Tarmogoyf, but you just never really see those two cards in concert or in tandem these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we see Jerry, being like, hey, I could shrink this Knight, make it really weak, but I think I maybe need the card from my Night Hall Spellbomb, so I'm just going to take a little 8 on the chin and then move on from there, which I think shows some real control and constraint, because, my first gut instinct is, whoa, I buy like 4 more drop steps by using the Night Hall Spellbomb, let's get it out of here. But Jerry's like, no, I kind of actually need the actual paper versus the idea of getting, more draw steps.
And that Jace is a fantastic top deck here from Jerry, who now that Doug has taken the shields down with that Mother of Runes, the Jace can bounce the Knight back to his hand, gonna have to spend the entire turn recasting that potentially, and currently no red source either for that Punishing Fire, which if we had protection for the Knight, we could either search up the red source or use the Mother to get a protected attack in. So as it is, this could be a big top deck for Doug, who I guess that kind of the job, right? If you could attack the Jace down, but Doug is opting to, it looks like, redeploy that Knight with that protection shield up. Or maybe not, going back and forth there.
Yeah, well, you see, the problem is Doug's played so much recent Legacy that Jace the Mind Sculpt isn't a card you're worried about. That's not the deck we're playing today, right? Like, this is actually a thing where it's like, oh, I probably do need to kill this Jace. I cannot avoid this like I used to be able to.
And the fact that Jace barely registers in Legacy anymore, that one sentence might be the perfect summary for this tournament and the state of the current Legacy format, is all of these new cards. Jace used to be the defining endgame threat in Legacy, going back 5 years, 10 years. That's just not really the case anymore.
Yeah, and, it's not like Jace has gotten weaker. It's everything else has risen to Jace's level. It's like, oh, I can have other end games. And even today, right? Like, we see things like Jerry's only playing a Jace, right? Like, maybe 1 or 2 would kind of be the traditional number we see in these sort of spots. And by the way, speaking of traditional stuff, Jerry has pretty untraditional cards in his control deck now, with like Wasteland and Loam being a combination that we might actually see come up in this endgame.
Yeah, and Wasteland cutting off that Dryad Arbor strands that Knight of the Reliquary back in Doug's hand, giving Jerry a lot more time to sift through some more cards, to find another threat to close the deal here.
Yeah, 100%. It's also really interesting to kind of look at like what these players maybe thought other people are going to bring. Like, we see Jerry has 2 main deck Nihil spell bombs, right? Like, Jerry definitely thought graveyard things are going to be a thing that matters. And we kind of see this too with like the sideboard creatures and the inclusion of cards like Questing Beasts. Like, oh, I maybe actually need to be beating down, thought Doug, as the Maverick player in this. Like, I need to have that sort of angle open to me, where before we didn't have a card like that also checked the Planeswalkers.
It is worth noting too that Jerry's deck, no sweepers, right? I guess some of them, like Toxic Deluge, don't exist in Heritage as opposed to Legacy. So Jerry has to answer all of these threats on a 1-for-1 basis, or try to invalidate them by having the bigger creature, by having the Uro, or something like that. But from this position, with a protected Knight of the Reliquary, that's going to be pretty tough to do.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be it's incredibly interested. Like, how is he going to fight through this Knight that's soon going to have a gem on it? It's looking like that's going to be kind of what the game's going to come down to, is like, can we protect this Knight for 2 turns? And we see Wasteland to draw kind of not what we're looking for, right? Like,
Yeah, it's tricky. We can cut that Caracas, which Caracas itself, when Uro is one of your main ways to actually take over a game and to end the game, is a relevant card. But from this position, it's not doing all that much. I guess the alternative is if you knew about the Punishing Fire, then you could save it for a spot where you tag the red source, you tag the Growth of Bone Willows. But there is the Uro, so Jerry getting rewarded for that line for sure.
yeah, Jerry just like, whatever, I'm going to use my card and see what happens from here and hit, probably the best card in his deck and the card he needed the most right now. Like we mentioned, the Knight just got shrunk by the Night Hall Spellbomb, so it's a little weaker now, but Umasawa Jite does a great job of making our things huge and kind of invalidating getting shrunk. So this is going to be interesting. And there's the whole dynamic too of like, will Doug want to tap out the Mother of Runes to make sure that the Knight of the Reliquary actually connects? So we saw before how punishing that line was before.
And you might assume from here that Knight is going to fetch up a Bajuka Bog or something to eat the Uro, eat everything else. Doug's deck, no Bajuka Bog. So this Knight, once again, it's not really a utility card so much as just a big thing, which if you need to find that Guy's Cradle or that Wasteland or something, can do that. From this spot, though, I think we just make a really, really big thing and start getting to work. That being said, these Nile Spellbombs have really done a number on Doug's graveyard to the point where we might have to spend a turn or two actually manually adventing the Knight to get it back to the point where we can start rumbling in combat again.
100%, yeah. At least safely, right? If we attack here, there's a real chance this Uro and, the brainstorm that Doug doesn't know about that we do, will just find an answer to the Knight or the Mom, and then suddenly, the whole house of cards is falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
From Jerry's side, getting Uro down, how, in current Legacy, I feel like, for the most part, if I get Uro down, as long as I don't get its swords, I feel like I just can't lose. I have to assume that holds doubly true here today, right? Like, it's just such an unbeatable engine once you get it in.
Absolutely. And you see in Contemporary Legacy, a lot of the supplemental set nonsense, if you want to call it that, is going toe-to-toe against the mainstream set nonsense. With so much of that removed, there's just less stuff that can randomly punish your Uro. So cards like Hull Breacher, for example, or there's a long list of cards which can just punish you for playing or for really participating in the game. And that's, I think, driving some of the objections to them. In this format, though, it makes total sense that Uro would be the go-to control finisher. And so you see that in Jerry's Sultai deck here. You see it in some of these 4-color control decks that we have from other players in the tournament.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see kind of what comes out today on top as like the ultimate like end game of choice. We see Jerry here escaping his Uro, just kind of, doing what Uro does, stabilizing and getting us some stuff here. Do you think, like, if you're Doug, how worried are you and how much are you just like begging to draw a Swords to Plowshare in this moment? Because I feel like if I was Doug, I'd be freaking out in this moment. Like, oh, what am I going to do? This is an Uro, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and that Caracas is gone. So there's no access to that line of defense against the Uro. So yeah, we might have to find that source and find it quick, because otherwise that Uro can run away with the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really kind of shows, like, despite there being so much like difference in like certain key early players in this deck versus Jerry's old deck, it does kind of have that old feel to Legacy. I feel like I'm watching Star City Games coverage from 2013 where it's like, oh yeah, Jerry kind of spent some turns, fell behind a little bit, had a couple removal spells, but now he's actually trying to claw back into the game in a way that feels very nostalgic to me and like very much like traditional Magic in a way that we just don't actually get as much these days.
I want to touch on the Nile Spellbombs, so, plural, that we saw in this game too. That is a card that I really associate with Jerry, one of his signature cards from decks like this back in the day. You see here where I don't think Jerry necessarily put that card in his deck thinking, I'm going to use this to shrink a Knight of the Reliquary, as opposed to someone's going to show up with graveyard combo decks and stuff like that. But it's a card which has a decent buyout clause. You can always just cycle it to draw a card. It's going to grow your Tarmogoyf. Just all of these little things. Exile an opposing Uro, maybe that's the primary use. But you saw it in this game. Even these relatively minor uses for it, that was potentially swung the entire thing to where this Knight, which could have been this gigantic threat, was shrunk and then got invalidated by the threats that you see on the board.
Yeah, and the Knight did also hit for like 8 on one of the turns, right? Like, it got through and just did a big chunk, but Jerry have so much passive life gain these days with cards like Uro, and it's just able to recoup that value and kind of go forward. And now we get to see, Sylvan Library plus Uro. That's a combo. We get to start drawing cards, gaining life, doing more and more and more, and sort of starting to snowball the game.
Yeah, and Jerry is the Wasteland deck now. He is aggressively going after Doug's mana, and we see him not keep the Days. Well, I guess we're going to draw that just off our Euro trip. But cards like Days actually creeping into relevance once again here now, where if we Wasteland that Guy's Cradle potentially, a card like Days can shut off one of the potential outs like Source of Plowshare.
Yeah, and you see Jerry just being like, well, I'm just gonna kind of wasteland this, keep my Uro, maybe I'll fetch away the Days, maybe I won't. Looks like Jerry's gonna decide to fetch it away. And now Jerry's kind of like, all right, well, you're gonna have no mana, and even if you did draw that source last turn, you're waiting to use it on me, I've got another Uro. So I'm gonna start to really wrap things up here. And this is really kind of the classic thing that we see from these decks in Legacy. And from control players and mid-range players like Jerry, where once they kind of get a grip on the game, they really make sure like, hey, no loose ends, there's no reason to be silly, I should just keep this Uro, there's no Bajuka Bog for my opponent, only thing that matters is Swords to Plowshare, so I'm gonna get that. And Jerry drawing the new technology we talked about, Life in the Lone plus Wasteland, actually just a real end game and not something that is exclusive to the land decks anymore. It is a real part of the engine for fair grindy decks.
Yeah, and our host today, Anurag, is someone who has really helped to drive that innovation. Winning these back-to-back challenges with that one copy, that second copy of Life in the Loam in these longer games, that comes up, and the moment it does, you see why people are trying to reorient their whole decks around it in this way.
Yeah, and we see a lot of respect from Doug too, right? Doug not flashing the Aven Mind Sensor, trying to get Jerry on the fetch there, right? Just kind of holding up his mana and trying to represent some things and hope to, maybe get Jerry to slip up. And like I'm in that kind of sort of position where I have to have Jerry mess up if I'm going to realistically get far ahead in this game.
Yeah, and we saw Jerry navigate from a position where it felt like he was really behind and under the gun to one where he has this commanding position. As you say, a player with Jerry's caliber is going to be thinking, what's the way I lose this game from this spot? And how do I close off that single-digit percentage chance that I get punked out of this game somehow? And knowing how to close off those outs when you're ahead, I think, is one of those differences that separates players like Jerry from us mere mortals, in the booth here instead.
Yeah. If I'm down there, I'm freaking out. I'm popping the spell bomb way earlier. I'm not drawing the card. No way you're hitting me for 10. Not at my house. Jerry's like, nah, whatever. What's 10 life for a card? And we're going to see the Aven Mindsman here come on down just before we lose our mana. It appears that Doug maybe plans not to protect the knight, if we're seeing this sort of play with the other.
Yeah, so we're doing some mid-combat, Knight of the Reliquary combat math, potentially. We're going to see just how big this knight ends up being when all is said and done here.
And maybe Doug's looking to actually just do just enough to Uro to where he can minus it with a Umezawa's Jite and get a turn cycle with Uro not attacking.
Oh, this is beautiful. Is he? Yeah, he's wasting his own Guy's Cradle to get the knight to a 6/6, which would threaten to trade the Uro.
Yeah.
And then now forcing Jerry's hand on, if there is a removal spot like the Assassin's Trophy, what do you want to do with it? Okay, so now we're going to get punished here.
Yeah, so we and it makes total sense too from Doug's spot, right? Like I'm out of land. My opponent has a bunch of wastelands. I've used a bunch of my basics. I just can't actually beat the card Assassin's Trophy or Revolted Fatal Push, right? Like I need to actually do something and kind of hope Jerry just has a bunch of lands in hand, and just fetched away some nonsense. And so we see Jerry have the Assassin Trophy for the Maverick and kill it. Now it's time to go to the board. We have some really interesting cards in the side. So one of those creatures I talked about before that wasn't in Legacy that we're seeing now today is Clothis, which has been a classic card in modern Gruul decks as a way to fight graveyard things, and was something that people went to try and fight Uro before. So I have to imagine we're going to see something like that. We have Clothis, Garruk, Knight of the Autumn, Fiery Justice, the Mind Track, Surgical Extraction, Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast, 2 chokes, and 2 Deafening Silence. Dom, what do you kind of like in this matchup?
Yeah, the Clothis in particular is very difficult to remove. An excellent answer to Uro and even to Tarmogoyf as well, is constantly nibbling away at the graveyard. And this is a perfect example of a card which had its day in the sun in Legacy. This was one of the standard legal cards which joined the format at the same time as Uro and was one of the main things keeping it in check. And so when Temur Delver was dominant once again for that period, you saw Clothis as the sideboard card that let them beat Snoko decks. And then Modern Horizons 2 kind of changed everything, where the moment Prismatic Ending joined the format, well, you couldn't rely on Clothis sticking around in a 15-turn game anymore, and so that card just basically disappeared. But without MH2 and some of these other sets in the format, that card could maybe have its time once again. And in this deck, you have Green Sun Titan, so you effectively have 5 copies of that card, almost guaranteeing that at some point you will be able to threaten it.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he kind of sideboards and kind of approaches game number 2 here with all these sort of things. Like, are we going to see all the surgical extraction, etc.? But from Jerry's side, we see 2 Carpeted Flowers, 2 Veil of Summer, 2 Nightclubber, which I thought was an unset card, but it turns out it's not. It's a Streets of Capenna card. 2 Narset, Part of Veil, 2 Spell Pierce, a Hymn, a Push, a Liliana's Triumph, a 3rd Nihil Spellbomb, and a Pernicious Deed. Jerry did not come to play around against these creature decks, Dom. He is prepared.
Yeah, Jerry's someone who really likes to have all of his bases covered to some extent, and someone who I associate with having these more versatile answers to have that good sideboard mapping against everyone, as opposed to this is my nuclear option that I'm going to lean on against this specific deck. So against Maverick, don't know how much of that he expected in the tournament. Doug's in there. You can maybe pencil in 1 copy. But for this matchup, I'm eyeing that Pernicious Deed. This is a fan favorite card that a lot of people find excuses to play whenever they can, and I think it's going to be pretty good here. This is something which can clean up an opposing Sylvan Library. It can deal with a board of creatures, even through a Mother of Runes. Doesn't actually deal with Clovis, and nothing really does. So that might end up being the kicker here. But everything else, the Deed can deal with at some point, even if the mana investment might be a too big a price to pay.
Yeah, it's super. What a fan favorite card, like you mentioned. Such a cool, exciting card that I think, Jerry kind of has probably as that card that maps into a bunch of spots, and we're going to see it probably here today as it is in Jerry's opening hand. Probably going to get mulligan here with no lands unless Jerry truly is a master. I'm excited to see how that goes. But we're seeing that here, and we're seeing a Fiery Justice brought in.
Oh, hell yeah.
Doug. That's so interesting. That is a card I would not have expected. What do you think the reasoning behind that is? Because that's a card that totally I was not expecting to come in.
Yeah, it's again 5 damage versus Uro is to say the least. Maybe just needing additional answers to an opposing Tarmogoyf is a thought here, but yeah, I'm a little surprised to see that one join the deck.
Yeah, it must be Tarmogoyf, and Fire Justice can hit Planeswalkers too, so maybe the hope is like you kill like a X4 Goyf and ping a little bit on a Jace and attack. I don't know. Doug is obviously someone who is a Maverick expert, like we mentioned, and plays a lot of Maverick, so I assume that he knows what the purpose for these cards is, and sometimes we really see that from players where a card that looks suspicious from someone watching the outside just has this perfect game plan in mind from the player themselves, so I'm really excited and hope to see that come up in this game. Meanwhile, Jerry is just like, I got lands, my Old Faithful Nihil Spellbomb, and a Tarmogoyf. Let's rumble. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be really interesting to see, like, hey, I kind of just got some stuff. Is that good enough? Hopefully.
Yeah, I think Jerry, from this position, almost actively wants to get wastelanded because he has so many lands. He would embrace that 1-for-1 exchange and hope to win it with the Tarmogoyf there on the back end. Instead, though, Doug is just going to deploy one of his 2 Thalias and no answer even for the first one. So that second one, no clear use in the near future. And again, with Jerry having so many lands, he can work through that tax in the long term.
Yeah, and up until this draw step, Jerry didn't even have anything that Thalia was even interacting with. So it's going to be really interesting. And interesting, we're seeing Jerry just prioritize like, hey, I'll take some damage once again, like we talked about in game 1. I'm just going to make sure that you don't develop. Even though we could have seen Jerry, play a Tarmogoyf. Obviously, it wasn't going to be able to block the Thalia right away, but just a really good use of his mana in that way. And it's really interesting to see, mana usage versus big game planning as something that's coming up here in Jerry in spades so far in this game.
Yeah, Jerry might be sensing weakness here where Doug, mod 6 and then had this kind of slow start out of the gate. And if you think his hand is going to be full of these conditional cards, more expensive cards, then that Wasteland could either effectively end the game on the spot or buy you more time to actually find some spells with that more expensive Ponder.
100%. And like you mentioned, Jerry's like, he's doing his best Joker. Like, I want you to wasteland me. And Doug's like, I'll wasteland you, if you're going to spend some time wastelanding me. Jerry is incredibly happy to see this happen. Even with a thing like Thalia, he can still cast all of his non-creature spells through Thalia right now. And we're seeing, Doug wastelanding, which makes total sense. We saw Jerry kind of take some time off there. Now unable to deploy any of his other threats.
I think Doug might almost want that wasteland back to have that 3rd land for the night, or to be able to cast a threat and threaten the red blast. Not saying the wasteland was wrong, but it's a kind of exchange that Jerry was maybe not so subtly inviting with his sequencing so far.
Yeah, it is definitely one of those moments of like, if I'm Doug, I think 99% of people are gonna be like, whatever, I've got Thalia wasteland you back. What you do, keep like 5 lands Tarmogoyf? And Jerry was like, well, I mean, maybe. And is now playing all of his lands that he had.
Yeah, Thalia with Wasteland is one of those classic legacy combos going back a decade or more. So good to see it here, but it's not quite working out the way it's in.
Yeah, and from Jerry's point of view, we're probably going to answer this Thalia here in the turn. He might be playing this Uro, but he might want to try and clear the way to make sure Clothis isn't a card, right? Like from Jerry's perspective, Doug stuck on lands, kept a hand, right? So I wonder to see how Jerry's going to play through a card like Clothis. He's just going to try and go fast and get the Uro out before Clothis can be a valid card.
Yeah, second Uro there from Jerry. So yeah, this is the turn. Do you try and Uro to set up for escaping that Uro the following turn, or do you maybe him to track and ponder this turn, or see maybe lead on ponder and then reevaluate from there?
Yeah, it looks like we're going to see Jerry lead on Ponder and just kind of wait on the Uro, which I think makes a good amount of sense. You have some other ways to use your mana, and let's just try and sculpt our hand and make sure we don't draw any more lands. We've been really happy to have a bunch of lands so far, but we probably only want one more for the foreseeable future. Or just, find Life from the Loam and get the Wastelands back and just get going. And we see Doug being like, no, 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 no. I'm land screwed. I want to make sure that I use my mana. No Ponders here today.
Yeah, if he draws that third land, he wants to be casting a Knight of some kind, of the Reliquary, of Autumn, something in there, and is not going to have a good opportunity to use that again. And it's a classic legacy spot, right? Of do you Red Blast this seemingly innocuous Ponder, Brainstorm, what have you? With Brainstorm, that's usually good enough to justify. With Ponder, it never feels good, but sometimes you just have to do it.
100%. Yeah, Doug realizes like, hey, things are starting to get out of hand. I can't let Jerry pull ahead. From Jerry's perspective, he hits the Swords to Plowshare. Incredibly happy. I got through the Uro answer. I'm the greatest to ever do it. And then Doug just draws in the Swords to Plowshare like every discard spell in history and is like, let's go, Uro. And so, the game's going to be back on foot here. But, it's kind of like we mentioned before, with the Stallion play and being stuck on lands, Doug's going to be in a really awkward spot if he doesn't draw a land on this next turn to get the Knight down. And then in the future, Swords to Plowshare that first Uro.
I think we're going to see why trading 1-for-1 with Uro is such a losing. Where okay, great, you top deck the Source of Plowshare as my Uro. Well, it already gave me 6 life, and now you're giving me 6 life again. Drew me 2 cards, and I have a second one in reserve, which I wasn't going to deploy anyway because it was Legend, and now I get to unleash that one as well. So we get the short-term victory of okay, I'm not dead yet. I get to kill the Uro, but I don't know if Doug can stay in the game for much longer there.
Yeah, and we're seeing Doug kind of be like, listen, just like Dom mentioned, right? Like, I got all this life, he's got all these cards, whatever. I've got to get this mom down before Uro finds an answer to it. And Dom, it's the Clubber, what looks to be an Unfinity card by name, a Plague Engineer, at home. What an incredible draw from Jerry.
This is a disgusting nightclub. Yeah. As so many of them often are. It's gonna almost. So with Plague Engineer, you have this static effect sticking around where if you draw another Thalia, another Mum, well, you have to call that Engineer first to get it through. This one is a one and done effect, but sometimes that's all you need. I will gladly pay 3 mana to kill both of your creatures and draw a card in the process.
Yeah, so Nightclubber ETB -1/-1 to all creatures on the battlefield. So like Dom mentioned there, it is a Plague Engineer-esque card. And we don't have like Plague Engineer, right? Which is such a dominant and oppressive card that we've just seen Elves in modern day just start to finally battle through that sort of card, which is like really hurt them for years.
It almost became this victim of its own success where the decks that it's best against, you couldn't really justify playing in a world where not just Engineer, but some of these other supplemental set cards like Fury, like, the list goes on and on. It's so tough to justify playing those decks when facing through those cards is such an uphill battle, and when the best decks in those formats can just pay 2 mana and make an 8/8 Murktide region or something. Like, why am I jumping through hoops to make a big champion of the parish or what have you, when people can just do that for me instead? So without some of those constraints on this format, we're going to get to see small creatures maybe have some more room to shine.
Yeah, and we see Jerry draw Life in the Loam here, and I mean, Doug's been stuck on mana for a turn. We've got 2 Wastelands in the graveyard. I have to imagine Jerry's just going to go after one of these 2 lands and, just start working through it and working towards the next Uro.
Yeah, we have no copies of actual lands in this tournament, but Jerry is showing what that Life in the Loam plus Wasteland interaction can do to people.
Yeah. And, it has that fair backup game that didn't have before. And, we drew the Green Sun Zenith. And Jerry actively went after the green card, probably thinking of a card like Green Sun Zenith there. And I think from this point, it's going to be really, really hard for Doug to get back in the next 2 turns. But once again, let's talk about like how Jerry, once a caliber of his, like a player of his caliber gets in this position, it's like, hang on, slow down. I've got the game won. There's no reason to rush. Let's just make sure I'm not giving up any percentage points. Should I be loaming here? Should I be IOKing? Should I be Uroing? Let's min-max and make sure I don't lose that 0.01 percentage draw.
A player of my caliber, whatever you might think that is, I'm going for that flawless victory. I'm loaming back that Wasteland. I'm tagging that plateau. And look,
Yeah.
part of me is just happy to see a plateau on the battlefield in the legacy format. So I might keep it around just to, uh, throw something its way. But let's get it out of there. Let's go for the flawless victory here.
You see, that's where you and I differ.
Yes.
I would leave the plateau because it's plateau. It's like, well, yeah, it's whatever. It's plateau. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Come on. And so we do see Jerry end up getting it back with the dredge off the life and loan from the Uro trigger and going for the flawless victory. But
I'm that guy through the window in the sickos me going, yes, wait on that plateau, get all of it out of there. It
100%.
used to be that on Magic Online, if a player didn't have a permanent of a certain type in play, the whole battlefield would resize itself to accommodate that. So you would get these funny shots where, you would wasteland their land, and now their Dryad Arbor would just be like 4x the size it was previously, taking up the entire battlefield. Not so much anymore. They've moved past that, sadly. But I long for the days where you could do that and then kill the Dryad Arbor and just leave them with absolutely nothing.
Yeah, now we're back in these sort of days, and what a sweet round one. I mean, unfortunately, we did have some mana problems there, but once again, what's gonna do? Not wasteland Jerry after Jerry spent time wastelanding him, and he's got this Thalia in his hand. His deck's full of lands. It has like probably one of the highest land counts of all the decks we're gonna see today, except for maybe actually Jerry's deck. And so we gotta just go for the wasteland and try and do the time old classic. Especially with so much weaker, like the decks are so much weaker than they were before, right? Like they can't get back on lower resources. Typically, Jerry just happened to keep, like we joked about, 5 lands Tarmogoyf. What are you gonna do? Wasteland me?
Yeah, let's talk about some of the other decks that we expect to see here. So we have our deck list in, we have our roster of players, and there's this interesting dynamic going on here where we have some of the boogeymen of both current Legacy and Legacy Past, the ghosts of Legacy Past, and then some decks which have kind of been crowded out a bit of current Legacy, but with some of these backstops from the supplemental sets removed, maybe have a bit more room to breathe now.
Yeah, 100%. I think the biggest show of that is Sneak and Show and Tell. That deck, huge part of the Legacy metagame in 2013, 2014. When I came up in Legacy, that was right at the beginning of it. That was the deck I had to play all the time as Elves, and I was so sad. I haven't seen a Show and Tell in years. My best friend has it tattooed on his arm, and he keeps that sleeve rolled up in shame because he can't play it anymore. He goes to these Legacy tournaments, he's not allowed to play Show and Tell. But today we have multiple players playing Show and Tell, and it's so cool to see a deck like that resurge onto the scene.
Yeah, including Jonathan Angelescu, JPA 93, the show and tell player. Like he's someone who has won high stakes Legacy tournaments on Magic Online with that deck when no one else even thought it was playable, and maybe even he thought it's a little bit sus right now, and maybe I should be playing Delver instead, which he has also done repeatedly to great success. But it's very good to see him flying the flag for show and tell in a format which is maybe going to be a little less hostile to it right now. So if you have to pick an early favorite, hard to bet against Jerry either after that match that we just saw. But hard to bet against JPA either.
Yeah, and it looks like we have finished round one of our tournament. So we're about to have round two start up here in just a couple of minutes. We're gonna have that come up to you soon. But yeah, like you mentioned, so many cool things popping up there. Dom, here's the deck I want to ask you about because here's the backstory. Originally, the deck tournament, closed deck list. We thought it'd be more fun to do that way. After talking to some players, we decided at the 11th hour, we're going to make it an open deck list. It's better for stream, better for the players. Just makes it a little less awkward for everybody. Some of our players are streaming. We would hate for, them to get an advantage because someone in Twitch chat's really excited about, let's say, Brian Cook playing Temur Delver, which is what he was going to play. But then switched to Storm, which is the deck. He's the only one to bring Storm today. It was the deck I think a lot of people thought was going to be the best deck. What do you think about Storm in this tournament right now? I mean, only one player brought it, and it felt like the most powerful thing. Like, obviously, this is it. The deck's almost exactly the same.
Yeah, I think some people, they saw a format that doesn't have Force Negation, doesn't have Flusterstorm, and some of these other cards, and they started salivating. And for Brian Cook, who has... he is the pioneer behind the epic storm, and the epic part is in all caps, and make sure you really accentuate that. He is the storm guy, and he has, if you've ever seen him playing in paper, he has this absolutely gorgeous foiled out Japanese storm deck, which I dread to think how much that's worth or how much it's worth to him in sentimental value. But he's someone who he's known for storm. He one of these people who they're a specialist with their deck to the point where they're going to win in spots where no one else could. And so I was keen to see, is he just going to run that back as he often does? And I think he assumed everyone else will make that same assumption about him. And in a closed decklist format, they're going to be marketing for their Force of Wills, not their Force Negations, because they don't have those, and that's part of the appeal. But they are going to have to mulligan for whatever small slice of their deck is relevant in the matchup. And so if then he leads on Volcanic Island Delver of Secrets, well, now you start that game with a massive advantage. And it must be said, Bryant is someone who also has won tournaments with Delver before. I think he 10-0 Legacy Challenge at one point with Blue Red Delver, just to prove a point about how good the deck was, that even someone with his inexperience with Delver could pick it up and just dominate, and he certainly proved his point. So
round is about to start.
So with that late change back to open deck list, he thought, hey, everyone knows I'm going to be doing this anyway. Why not just do my thing that I can do better than basically anyone else in the world? And we'll see if he can do that thing in this tournament here.
Yeah, and I'm going to put in the last result right now. And he actually lost round 1. I believe he lost to one of the other combo decks. I don't have all the lists in front of me here, but I'm about to start round 2 right now. Just double checking to make sure, we don't have any we're kind of doing it over here in a little separate program. Just want to make sure we had all the results in correctly. I'm going to pair round 2 right now and put it up there. And it's going to be exciting to see kind of what happens here. Some of our players that won round 1, we saw Hello Newton beat Caleb Dorwall in a match, and so that was one of the things that was happening with the side matches. We had elves versus the Bant control deck, so that was pretty interesting. A couple of the other matches that kind of happened, let's see here real quick. We had elves beat Eldrazi Post, which I think is kind of a classic thing. We only had one Eldrazi Post player. I actually thought that deck was going to come in real waves. Like that's a deck that is very, very close to being good again. Kind of got pushed out by the MH2 cards and etc. And we only had one person bring it. I think that's kind of like a testament to like, hey, this deck is not the most exciting deck.
I thought that might actually be the smart kind of next level choice. If you think that people will be showing up with their Dark Rituals and so on, then being the deck that gets to main deck Chalice of the Void and a bunch of these other disruptive components while having a fast clock sounds like a pretty good place to be. As you say, I think it's a deck which has been edged out of current Legacy, and so you're looking at this new puzzle, this like throwback Legacy format, but which also has some of the newer stuff. Tough to know exactly how good it's going to be, and so I think you see, that player Lee chose a deck because that's just what they love to play, and also probably think that it's going to be a good call for the tournament as well. No one else took that same gamble though.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we're setting up our feature match right now. Not 100% sure exactly who we're watching. But one of the decks that won was Painter last round, which is a deck that we have seen. I feel like it recently did well, like in a challenge or something. But one of the decks, once again, that kind of doesn't play many MH cards in many of those sort of supplementary product cards, and is now kind of here and like, hey, I'm this really kind of strong combo deck, and I've gotten a couple new tools over the last couple of years that can really kind of spice my deck up.
Yeah, it won that challenge in the hands of Callum Smith, who is our Painter player in this tournament. So he did a lot of work to put that deck back on the map. And this is an old Legacy favorite, going back to the very early days of the format, which has had this steady trickle of new cards coming in. So we look at Callum's deck list, for example. Fable of the Mirrorbreaker was a card that really took that deck in its current form to the next level. F.I.R.E is a card which is not legal for this tournament, but often seen in Painter deck lists. You have a bunch of these. If you have these Pyroblasts and these Red Elemental Blasts, which you kind of want to pair with your Painter, sometimes you can't always do that. Perfect thing to just pitch to wipe the board. And then you have a lot of variations within that. So Khan the Great Creator, great card with Painter, great card against Painter as well. And so you see lists going back and forth on whether they want to leverage that card. So excited to see what Callum can do with his build of that deck for this tournament too.
Yeah, and let's hop right into the deck list and see exactly what we're going to be playing and watching this round. And the first up, Doomsday. So this is a deck that we saw recently do really well at the Legacy Pit in the hands of Samantha Murphy. She crushed it there, and this kind of deck has risen back up in normal Legacy. And in this format, uses a lot of the best cards in the format and just gets to keep play them. And, lost a couple small things in Modern Horizons, but nothing too pivotal.
Yeah, so this is Brian Koval, very popular Legacy YouTuber, content creator, and someone who has a very wide range in the format. He loves his blue cards, but he'll play within that constraint whatever he thinks will give him the best shot. And his tweet, when he revealed his deck list here, was, okay, so I don't have Personal Tutor, which was in Portal back in the day 20 years ago, but in return, I don't have to play against Force Negation, Flusterstorm, Dress Down, Endurance. I don't have to play really the deck's only bad matchup in Delver. That Delver still exists. We have some Delver players in this tournament, but their decks are a lot worse as a result. So I have to play against a powered down version of my own real opponent, and the other exchange that we get by playing the second Heritage massively favors me. So yeah, sign me up, and that sounds like a great call.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I can't wait to see this deck in action. It is, Doomsday back like in this day. Back in the day, used to be the deck with like, the 1,000-page article about how to deal with the Doomsday stuff. Since then, we've gotten Thassa's Oracle, so it's a little less complicated, but it's still really cool. And a lot of cool new cards have been added to the deck. Like if you spot corner, we have 2 Sheoldreds in our sideboard, kind of, as this sort of new fair grindy card. And that's when you can Dark Ritual out in the Brainstorm Ponder format. That shock effect really starts adding up really quickly, and being a 4/5 body is just so huge. Unholy Heat's not part of the format, Dom. You can play creatures that are bigger than 3 toughness, and they're going to stick around for a long time unless your opponent has swords.
Yeah, that was an innovation from Max Gilmore, who won the most recent Legacy Showcase with that technology of Shieldred in the Doomsday sideboard. And that's a top 8, which featured some of the other competitors we have in this tournament as well. And it makes a lot of sense of, we've had the Doomsday players thinking, okay, the only thing we need to fix, basically, is this Delver matchup. And so you're going to consider these pretty radical steps for how to do that. And maybe Shieldred is it. Maybe we finally have the answer.
Yeah, speaking of like Legacy Challenge competitors, I think XJ here might have been one of the people who was in that top 8. Mono Red Prison, Mono Red Moonstompy has really risen up in Legacy over the last, let's say, 5 or 6 months, and has become a real player in the format, and has just become this kind of, hey, we have good mana, we have these lockout pieces, and we have all these powerful cards that we can play and really take over the game. We saw License Hearse be a huge player in helping that when it comes to current Legacy. With Murktide Regent being such a big part of the format, along with things like Uro, we saw a pile of Hearses at the beginning, and now the deck looks more and more like this as time goes on. And Dom, I love Elves. That's the deck I own in paper. It's all I play in Legacy, but this is the other deck. If I was going to play anything in Legacy, this is the one I would play, which, whatever that says about my character, it says about my character. But what do you think about this deck?
This is a great kind of entry-level deck to the format in the sense that this deck maybe gets more free wins than anything else. The number of games you win with turn on Chalice of the Void or turn on Blood Moon or what have you really dwarfs anything, and that is honestly one of the biggest virtues a deck can have. So yeah, this would be near the top of my list if I'm preparing for a Legacy tournament or a Serious Heritage tournament, because one of the funny dynamics going on here is this deck existed 15 years ago. You go back to when Worlds 2007 had Legacy. This was the breakout deck of that tournament. And you look at the 3 basic components of this recipe. You have the fast mana, you have the lock pieces, and then you have the threats to finish the game with. The fast mana, these are the classic Legacy cards from back in the day, your Ancient Tombs and your City of Traders. You look at your lock pieces, your Blood Moons, your Chalices, your Trinispheres. These are cards from like the mid-2000s or earlier. It's really only the threats that have had substantial upgrades in recent years. So back in the day, you had to kill people with Rakdos Pit Dragon, Gathan Raiders, a nice little Future Sight limited banger for all of you out there. But it kind of didn't matter, because if your opponent literally can't cast spells anymore, it doesn't really matter what you finish the game with. It just so happens we actually have good ways to do that now.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing we see so much with this tournament, right? It's creatures that have gotten the big buff in the last 10 years. And that's been really the difference in design a lot of way, right? Is like, hey, let's make creatures better. Creatures can be something that's more than just stats, and we'll just give them a little less stats. But in a format like Legacy, when you combine the smaller stats with these lock pieces, it's cool. They create these big bodies. And let's hop right into the match here. Remember, this is an open decklist tournament, so both players know what the other one is playing. It's going to really make some interesting mulligans here. And we're seeing Brian here kind of consulting the deck list, being like, okay, how, like, is it Chalice, Trinisphere? What exactly do we have here? Let me make sure I'm fighting through the right lock pieces. Meanwhile, Cloud has got triple Spirit Guide and a Chalice, basically, and a Rabblemaster. Dom, is that a hand you can keep? Is that the sort of thing you're looking to do with this deck? Because to me, it looks like, let's go, giddy up.
Are we on the play or the draw here? And honestly, that is a question that defines so many games with and against this mono red prison deck, where that Chalice on 1 before you've had the chance to ponder or preordain to fix your hand, versus or something like a Blood Moon before you've had the chance to crack that Misty Rainforest to find your basic. Like these are game changing decisions, and so seeing who's going to be the first to take a game action is going to really inform all of our commentary on the game here. Looks like it's Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like so Brian got to be on the play. I'm also super curious. Is this like a ley line? Was this a Chalice on Zero matchup? Sorry, or it's just like like there are things like Lotus Petal. I think this build has like a couple Lion's Eye diamonds, if I remember correctly. Well, at least one of our Doomsday players do. But it's like okay, like are we're gonna see XJ do that, or we're gonna see the Chalice on one. It's gonna be super interesting. And then inversely, how is Brian going to force in response? Like do you force the Chalice on Zero, or do you let it resolve? It's super cool to see kind of how this all plays out.
Yeah, Chalice on Zero can shut off some of those post Doomsday combo lines where you play Doomsday, you immediately start cycling, and then LED and Lotus Petal let you draw and cast the Thassa's Oracle on the same turn. That being said, but any time before that point, Chalice on one can be backbreaking, where you see Brian's hand, it's full of these 1-mana cantrips and card manipulation spells, and then the card Dark Ritual is what lets you power out that fast Doomsday, where otherwise, that basic island in your triple black finisher deck is potentially going to be a problem. But you kind of have to do that against the Blood Moons and Maguses and so on. So the threat of all of these different lock pieces punishing you in different ways can really put you in a bind.
100%. And we just saw JR draw City of Traders. And so now we're thinking, okay, like we can do Rabble Master plus Chalice on one. We can do it all this turn.
Yeah.
Powerful Chromok start off here. And that's super similar to Spirit Guide, Spirit Guide is not going to be a one and done now.
Yeah, it's almost upgrading our Simian Spirit Guide into a land. Very Mirrodin-esque. And so, yeah, I don't know if this is the payoff or the bait spell even, but this is a card that Brian, I think, definitely has to answer here.
Yeah, I grew up, I started playing around Theros time, so just seeing Rabble Master be the payoff is what it looks like for JR here, unless this is like a cheeky Chalice, so it's like, hey, I've got all this mana, don't worry about it. We might just see this Rabble Master kill Brian. I don't think Brian has too much removal in his deck, for at least killing this Rabble Master.
Yeah, this is a dedicated combo deck, at least in game one, and so almost any creature is sick. The question is that creature going to be relevant in the face of potentially a blisteringly fast combo? And this Rabble Master certainly is. That is a fast clock if you have nothing to do with it. But there's 100%. Doomsday.
Yeah, we have Doomsday. So all I'm missing is the black mana, and we have to consider to try and find it. I'm curious, I don't know how Brian's Preordain went there. We don't get to see exactly how the scries go, which is more exciting. I like it that way anyways. And so, Dom, do you pop the Petal for the Ponder to try and find the Forever source?
It looks like we're setting up for Limdal's Vault end of turn. I'm not going to try and read off the whole text of Limdal's Vault. It's a very wacky, old-school combo card that you used to see in these decks before they acquire some of the more efficient card selection. But yeah, world without personal tutor, like the one lost to this deck from the Heritage restriction, you kind of have to revisit some of these old gems.
100%. And, well...
Okay.
We have the Cabal Ritual, so we have the ability to cast our Doomsday if we want to go for that line right now. And I have to assume with the, Rabble Master beat down like this, you just have to kind of go for it.
Yeah, so we're Doomsaying, and this is when, as commentators, we're put to the test. Do you have the Doomsday knowledge to figure out if there's a kill from this position? And so we have a Petal there, we have a Ponder.
Just know that your paycheck is dependent on this. Continue.
So we certainly have that first card. We got some mana floating. We had Threshold for that. Cabal Ritual, is that right?
Mm-hmm. So I think they're, I obviously know it. The people at home obviously know it. Everyone here knows it, Don. We're just making sure that you know it. So I really wouldn't want to speak because it's kind of like deriving, if I deprive you that learning moment, how will you know for the next time? I got to teach you how to play.
Yeah, so...
So this is the only time I wish I could actually see what was going on, because I played a little bit of Doomsday recently, but the new Doomsday piles are very easy. It's like, I put the Oracle at the bottom most of the time, I put a Cavernous Soul, I do my thing, I win. And so, that's pretty easy. With these older ones, this is where I know that the end game is still Thassa's Oracle, so it's a little bit easier once you get there, but it is still kind of a whole thing and a half. And don't worry, Brian, about trying to show us your whole deck. It's a whole thing. Just go off, King. We believe in you. And Brian, someone who plays a lot of Legacy, usually these Legacy decks, I'm sure he knows like what the fastest kill is, but it's probably like, okay, what's the fastest versus the most optimal versus like, what if JR rips a Trinisphere? Can I beat that, And kind of thinking through all those permutations right now.
The other nice thing too is if you're a popular, well-connected Legacy player, you decide to pick up Doomsday, you can find one of these Doomsday experts to give you a session in the dojo to get those skills. up to snuff quickly. I think, doing the math here on the fly, I think he's short, where he's gated either on cards or on mana. So we can crack the pedal for blue, we can cast the Ponder, but to draw the first card potentially in that chain. But where does that get us? And so I think if we could see a second card, there might be some like LED deep analysis line that would get us there. But as it is, I don't know if he could do it.
Yeah, so it's gonna be curious. Like, so we're probably gonna see him ponder here, just to try and set up everything and get a little bit closer and try and have the next turn. We switched over, and did he just concede? It looked like there was a pop up there that was the concede button. It must have been something else. Don't worry about it. That might have been our spectator bug there. Anyways, regardless, now we have the whole deck on screen here. Obviously, once again, Dom, I know what the line is. Everyone else knows what the line is. We don't even need to talk about it, really. We should talk about like how nice it is outside. It does look like we conceded just because we actually can't win this turn. And Doomsday does kind of left it out. Yeah, exactly. The line.
We all miss it potentially, and maybe some of the Doomsday enjoys in the chat can let us know what we're missing. But I think he and I came to the same conclusion, which is, yeah, we're short on some resource there, and so we got to try and win the next two to get this match here.
Yeah, the resource that he was short on, Dom, was life. He was dying.
Yeah.
Anyways, regardless, here we have Brian Koval's whole sideboard up here on the side, and it's totally loading for me. I totally can read what that weird card is. We have a Shielded Brazen Borrower, Duress, Mystical Dispute, Echoing Truth, Leyline of the Void, and Dom, can you help me out? What is this card between Brazen Borrower and Duress? Because it won't load up on my screen here to get the actual card name.
I want to say this is a black removal spell of some kind, maybe like a.
Oh, behind
Nausea. Okay.
Nausea. Okay. Interesting. All right. I'm curious. So, how much removal do you bring in versus like you're trying to go fast? Because we mentioned, where we saw in that game, I should say, Doomsday cuts the life in half, right? So these early creatures that kill you is a problem. Do you just try and go as fast as possible and maybe bring in just a little bit of disruption for the lock pieces?
So one issue there is that disruption, outside of maybe engineered explosives, all it does really is just bounce those and buy you a turn, which if you're facing several lock pieces or you don't have the combo pieces to follow up with, maybe isn't going to get you there. What I'm wondering is, do we want these shielders? Because if we just turbo that thing out, I'm not sure the deck can really deal with that.
100%. Yeah, so I looked up Nausea is all creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. Just wanted to confirm there wasn't any bonus text on that card. So, Plague Engineer at home once again. Maybe didn't find the Nightclubber tech like Jerry did. Maybe this is just a little better, being a little cheaper. Anyways, from JR side of things, we have the Elder Dragon War, which is a great thing to see in Legacy. We have Dead Gone, Fear Macabre, Goblin Crater Maker, a Null Rod, a Pyroblast, a Red Elemental Blast, a Sorcerer Spy Blast, a Trinisphere, and another Unlicensed Hearse. We just saw how, kind of Chalice of the Void was the bait spell, right? And we can see how these creatures, with the life total once again kind of being 10 to start, getting in that little early damage really matters in killing them. Do you think we're going to see just an increase in I'll bring in my Trinisphere, it's so good, but for the most part I'm just going to try and stay the same and just get rid of these Dead Gaunts and kill you?
Yeah, you want the Trinispheres, you want the Pyroblast, Red Blast as well, maybe even the Null Rod to shut up some of those the combo lines. I think the issue though is, we mentioned Doomsday happy to not be playing against Force Negation. It's going to be sorely missing its own copies in this matchup. You often see in current Legacy Doomsday with a full playset of Force Negation in its sideboard for matchups like this, where all you need to do is answer that first lock piece to give you the time to fire off the Doomsday. We don't have that, and I think that's a dynamic which makes these zombie decks a lot better in this field.
100%. And we see Brian here has the EE, so it's going to have a Chroma and the Chalice of the Void answered, unless JR just has the sickest soul read of all time, puts a Chalice on 0 as well. But besides that, the hand is kind of what we talked about before. We have City of Traders just to kind of go fast for JR and just put her Goblin Rabblemaster down, and Brian has sort of fast combo hand, but it's gonna being on the play here really matters, and it really worries me. Even if Brian wins this game game 3 look like being on the draw? But let's get Brian through game 1 first, or game 2 first.
Yeah, the interesting thing from last game too is the fact that it was exactly Ponder was the death knell there. If that had been a Brainstorm, or if even Consider, because what you can do is you stack your pile, so you mill over the deep analysis, you draw the Lion's Eye Diamond, and that was a new functionality to the deck that the printing of Consider opened up. You can play the LED, crack it, draw some cards, and then finish a combo line from there. But the fact that it was exactly Ponder was a thing that left us kind of checkmate, where we couldn't do anything. So interesting to see that very niche scenario come up there.
100%. Yeah, and we see an interesting moment, right? Like, if Brian wants to, he can pop the EE with the imprint trigger on the stack, I believe, right? And then just actually stop our Rattlemasher coming down. But it's going to involve losing our Lotus Petal, right? Which is kind of velocity towards the Doomsday that we're setting up the next turn. And JR has to decide, okay, will Brian be willing to do that? And like, what does his hand look like he's willing to do that? And what the hand that doesn't? And can I beat that? And we see here we're just going to lead on this and be like, all right, Brian, do you want to pop it or not?
I think one issue too is we don't quite know exactly what we're looking for. Like, if we found a Dark Ritual, we could consider firing off the Doomsday. But beyond that, we don't know what the relevant follow-up log piece is going to be, or what the kind of threat that we're facing down is. So unless we think we're under so much pressure that we just have to Hail Mary and dig for the Dark Ritual, then I think holding it makes some sense there.
100%, I agree. And we're going to see, it looks like just a Chalice on 0. Just be like, hey, if you have any sort of Lotus Petal line, whatever, if you're going to spend some time popping the EE, also whatever, I've got this Rattlemasher in play already. I don't need to worry about that sort of value being lost. There's the Brainstorm we talked about before. So could this be the setup towards having the Thassa's Oracle kill in the next turn?
It needs a lot to go right from this spot. We need either Dark Ritual, or we need, I guess, another Lotus Petal to help with that. But then, depending on how we stack that pile, this follow-up Chalice of the Void could pose a lot of problems. And let's see here. So if we have to crack the fetch, that's 8. We go down to 9. We're safe from this Rebel Master attack, so we can pass the turn.
Yeah, I think we have to just kind of go for the Doomsday, because you get one turn out of it, right? But then I guess the backup Chalice of the Void is going to be the problem.
Yeah, so we're going to have 2 lands and an E in play. And then...
Yeah, a little weird. I'm going to let Dom do that while I talk. Once again, obviously, viewers, you know the line. I know the line. This is Dom's pop quiz. He doesn't do a lot of commentary, so we got to make sure to give him his moment in order to do it. He's never really done it before. So we're going to give Dom that time to really work through that line. We figure it out here, just like Brian's kind of figuring out. And this is kind of the interesting part of these combo decks, right? Incredibly powerful. We mentioned at the start of this round how like Doomsday is one of the strongest combo decks that didn't lose too much. Losing personal tutor mattered, but not the end of the world. We've seen other versions of Doomsday kind of survive without that card, and we had that here today. But JR kind of has this aggressive deck that can actually punish one of the weaknesses of Doomsday, which is, starting at 10. And it looks like we're doing some pondering. So maybe this is some sort of Dark Ritual is like the only way to actually win this line.
Or maybe the plan is to, Doomsday and then try and go from the same turn the following turn. Brian doing the math, I think, realizing that the pass or turn pile he can make right now, if he cracks the pedal, would be so vulnerable to basically anything. That would be pretty hard to slog through.
Yeah. So we're pondering, we're kind of figuring out exactly what we need here. This is also a coverage moment classic. Flashback, Cedric and Patrick in the booth. Something about fiddling with my cards and ponder. Dom, I'm gonna let you know a secret. There's a reason I play Elves and Legacy. I hate blue cantrips. It hurts. Just like fiddling with my cards and getting the 1% extra value, it does not spark joy. It sparks sadness.
I cannot imagine having to try and commentate a Paper Legacy tournament, pondering, just looking at those 3 cards for a good 30 seconds or so, and then shuffling the deck and then drawing that card. I can try and fill that dead air, but I'm going to need a few reps back here in the booth. Going to need to de-rust a bit before that happens.
Yeah, and heaven forbid we play another ponder. Anyways, we don't have to worry about that because JR's saying, hey, I'm attacking you. You're going to go to 1. So you're going to go to 6 if you cast Doomsday, and you're going to die at that point if you do not kill me this next turn. So JR is like, hey, have your worst. Although it's interesting, we could see JR go and play Chalice for 1 and just be like, hey, you can pop your EE, but you're going to lose the pedal if you do that. But you have to work through everything. But if you don't, this Chalice of the Void is going to kind of lock you out. But it looks like JR thinks maybe there's a chance for some sort of sweeper nonsense, maybe like that nausea to buy time.
I would be surprised to see that here. Like you're dealing with one half of a force of goblins after it's already kind of done its job. Um, so yeah, I think that JR just is applying as much pressure as he can as fast as possible, which is, easy to do now with Rabble Master as opposed to whatever options you had to turn to back in 2007. Yeah, so Max, who, as we mentioned, won that showcase with Doomsday, in the chat here saying there was a line if Brian did go for Doomsday last turn of you sack an island on top to where you can crack the EE, deal with the chalice, and then brainstorm into the combo pile that lets you win from there, even through top deck Blood Moon or anything like that. So unclear if Brian missed that, in his attempt to try to figure this out on the fly, or if I decided some other line was better there.
Yeah, it's so hard to know too. It's like, okay, if I do that, I get Trinisphere. Can I actually win? And it's also just like, once again, everyone at home, I'm sure you've played a tournament Magic before. It's so much harder in the moment than it is outside of that pressure on you. The players are playing for $300 in first place, which is not bad for a free tournament. They're running on the weekend. We get to play one of your favorite formats, Legacy. So there is something on the line, but more importantly on the line, Dom, is the pride for today. Like, hey, with all the BS gone, I came out on top in the higher skill format, and so it's kind of coming out there.
It's Heritage, Mason. We're playing Heritage. Gotta get the branding consistent. Yeah.
Heritage. I can do that. And we do see EE here wiping away all the goblins. And this seems to be maybe what Brian was setting up for, is like, hey, we'll remove everything, and then I will now, set up Doomsday to kill you, and hopefully buy enough time with the Rabble Master, losing all the tokens. But we are gonna see Chalice of the Void come down here from JR, most likely. Just has a bunch of lands in hand, so probably not going to do anything besides just chalicing on one here. And I wonder how that affects sort of actually winning the game in the next turn cycle.
Yeah, so Brian taking it a lot slower here, and so trying to set up for this turn where we can Doomsday. If we get to Brainstorm immediately on top of that, then we can set up a kill. Chalice is going to make that more difficult, and the issue is we still need to find the land to make that happen. So maybe firing off this Brainstorm now, and then reevaluating from there.
Yep. Well,
so there's a now dead Lotus Petal that we can't leverage the way we want to.
I think the Chalice is on one.
Okay, yeah, on one.
Yeah,
which...
so dead Brainstorm, maybe worse. Setting up these lines to actually kill and win. It's gonna be really hard to actually cantrip through here. We don't have the life or the street wraiths to actually cycle through a bunch and get the win.
Yeah, and it's going to hurt him on the other end too, where now, Dark Ritual, Brainstorm, all of these cantrips shut off as well. And you need, if you're going to try and Doomsday and win on the same turn, you need that cantrip to find that first card on the top of the stack and get the chain going. And we don't have that at this point. So, yeah, we saw that if Brian casts this Doomsday here, going to go down to 4, there's on the board facing from the Rabble Masters. So, yeah, but Brian took a bit of a slower approach, almost like a weird combo control deck in that game, but the combination of pressure and lock pieces, this is why Moonstompy is so good. It can seem like a gimmick deck sometimes, and certainly there are draws where your one lock piece gets answered, you don't do anything, or you just plug it into oblivion, but this deck is very fast and very consistent at doing its thing, and that's why JL1, he's top 8'd, I think 3 large legacy events on Magic Online recently with this deck. And trying to get
in a couple challenges in the same weekend, I believe, too.
and trying to win the most important of all, this Heritage tournament here as well.
Yeah, I haven't talked to JR too much about his feelings on the actual Modern Horizons stuff, but from what I can tell from social media, it is not a strong love. Over here in Heritage is kind of where the happy place is.
Yeah, and this is a deck which is basically entirely intact in Legacy and Heritage at the same time. The question really is, what is the prey that you're hoping to feast on, and how does that change, and how does that inform which pieces are more important or less important, for example?
Yep. So, by the way, speaking of other matches, I think all of our backup feature matches are done, and I'm going to give you all kind of a rundown of what's happened. So we saw Jerry beat Callium, so Sultai bested Painter last round. We saw Newton on Elves lose to Jonathan, which I believe Jonathan was one of our Sneak and Show players, if I remember correctly. And then we just saw the other round. And so we only have a couple more rounds waiting. Brian Cook defeated Douglas, and New defeated Testacular over there as well. So we only have a couple rounds left. So we're gonna have just a little bit of time to kill here while the last couple people are playing. We're gonna see if we can get them. Well, it turns out we actually got one of them going backup, so we're gonna throw down to there right now. I believe it is going to be Sneak and Show is one of the things, but I'm not 100% sure. It's one of our two matches left, Sneak and Show. It looks like one of the players is going to be on ban control. I believe this is Caleb Doorworld's list of. Oh, this is Francisco. Okay, Francisco on ban here. Sorry, I was watching Caleb stream last night. He had a deck very similar to this. But yeah, this is Francisco's deck, and this looks very similar to a lot of stuff we've seen right now. Just kind of missing the Hull Breacher and stuff. Dom, what do you think about these decks? I think they're super exciting.
Yeah, so this is the 3-4 color kind of soupy decks that we've come to know and love, headlined by Uro in Legacy over the past few years. We see, to me, this looks like a Francisco deck. We have Field of the Dead as this end game that we're working towards. We got Life on the Road. We're doing some like funky land stuff in here as well. We've got that Mystic Sanctuary, which that to me is one of the low-key nonsense cards that came through that main pipeline in recent years. And you see that one, just the existence of that as a one-off in the Delver decks, for example, changes so much about how powerful those decks are going into the mid-game, going into the late game. And in a control deck like this, Mystic Sanctuary with Terminus, I mean, that's an interaction which our dear host here, Anurag Das, won back-to-back Legacy challenges with. You can use the exclamation point Terminus command to gain some more information on that particular interaction there. But just a kind of classic control deck headlined by some of these new cards. And, Sylvan Library, a card from back in the day, match made in heaven with Uro, as we covered before.
Yeah, and then Matthew here is playing a much more aggressive Delver. So this is like Is It Delver, like we saw in early 2014 really pop up. No Price of Progress, it seems, at least in the main deck of this one. We have them over there on the sideboard, but it's gotten some great new additions in recent years. So Ledger Shredder add to the fold, and Expressive Iteration, just combined with some Bolt and some interaction, and Brazen Borrow to kind of round out that, got a bad matchup, slap a Brazen Borrow in, we fixed it now.
Yeah, you got some Chain Lightnings in the main deck too. This is effectively the more aggressive pure Is It Delver approach that some people were taking just before MH2 dropped and gave us Dragon's Face Channeler and Daggervan, rest in peace be upon him, Murktide Regent, all of these other cards. And those are often named as the culprits for why Delver took over the format there once again. Turns out, though, even without any of that stuff in the mix, like this Delver core, it's been the S tier deck in Legacy basically in every other snapshot going back 10 years. And so no surprise to see Delver looking good in this tournament too.
I'm going to guess just from this time that's gone on in the tournament, this is probably game number 2. Anurag can maybe use the voice of God and let us know. So Bant is up one. So Francisco did win game 1. And I mean, I guess I said here by, Osmandius here, Matthew being on the play here and attacking. Dom, I really like the looks of both of these decks. I think they're both so cool, so exciting. What do you think, though, about this sort of Is It deck lined up against the Bant control deck?
So this is the kind of matchup which there's a lot of play back and forth, but the theory is, at least, if you ask the Bant control players, they will tell you it favors them. If you ask anyone if they have a good Delver matchup, they will tell kind of the litmus test you have to pass in Legacy or Heritage, potentially. But these Bant decks, I think, really do. If you build your deck properly and you pilot it in a disciplined way, I think the matchup does favor the Bant side. We also see this version of Delver taking this more aggressive stance with cards like Monastery Swiftspear. These are cards which can kind of run out of gas more quickly. So you see here, there's just not going to be that many ways to keep triggering Prowess, barring a top deck Expressive Iteration or something like that. And so just as a pure source of damage, this is going to become quite anemic quite quickly. And so, this is less flexible Delver deck than we see nowadays, where, you can deal your damage in 8-point chunks via Murktide Regent, for example, or you can play this much longer game. Matt has to win the game more quickly, and so far, his deck is not cooperating.
100%. And we had the players playing some Turbo Magic here. Francisco has Carpet of Flowers, which is so funny. I mean, it's still an Is It Delver deck. It can grind and do all that sort of things, but it is funny just to see, the Price of Progress deck. You can bring in Carpet of Flowers. It's just such a powerful card. It really had its heyday in Legacy and has come back and force in current Legacy. Regardless of that, though, Matthew here resolving one of the kind of cards we joked about is like, you think this is banned, but it's not expressive iteration, which allows you just to pull so far ahead. And looks like it found us a bobble here. So doing its best shock impersonation when you trigger with prowess and getting us just a bunch more cards. And then we got a little bit of a scry trick here going with the bobble and the fetch.
Absolutely. And especially with bobble, that's energy we've seen in modern over the past few years. Not so much in legacy. So it's nice to see some of that kind of translating over to Heritage as well. But yeah, Francisco, it seems like he's mostly in the clear now. A decent life buffer to work with. We've got the Carpet of Flowers, which Carpet of Flowers against the blue decks in Legacy, and specifically against Delver, that's leaning so heavily on cards like Daze and Spell Pick. This is, in matchups where this card has text, it is one of the best cards ever printed. And you're going to see some of that play out.
100%. Yeah. It's going to be super cool to see that go here. And we see Narset kind of being like, hey, all right, I can't stop expressive, but all the other cantrips, you're going to try and chain those off and burst me down. That's not going to work. We see Francisco start to pull ahead here with that card and setting up, snap plus swords. And we're going to be in kind of a pretty safe place once we see that sort of resolve here. And Francisco actually finding another swords with Veil of Summer. So looking to be in a really strong position here for Francisco. Just got to worry about not dying to runners off the top.
Yeah, that Narset meant we couldn't crack that Mishra's Bauble immediately to get another card. And now this Ponder that we just drew is going to be shut off until we can deal with it. Yeah, that card just devastating against anyone playing Brainstorm, Ponder, the good cards in the Legacy format. You can see why Narset was such a game changer.
100%. And we do see Matthew here popping the bubble now so we can get around the Narset. And, Francisco's just going to take a little hit on the Narset. Doesn't want to expose the swords or anything when we have the Veil locking it up. Once again, Francisco doesn't know that doesn't have, like a Daze or Force Enhance. So just taking a little bit of damage in order to get there. And it's Uro time again, it looks like.
Yeah, and we're going to see why Uro is so good at closing the game against these Delver decks, where even if you have some way to deal with the front half or the back half, you kind of have to deal with both, and then eventually that same Uro, it can be cast several times in the same game, and at some point, that is going to seal the deal. And if you have a card like Murktide Regent, you can race it in theory. None of that here. And so, Swift Spear versus Uro is not, I know which side of that I want to be on.
100%, yeah. And, with Carpet of Flowers, too, it's so easy. If Francisco wanted to, we could see the Uro come back this turn. Now, maybe Francisco's shoe is going to play around the Daze and / Force we've respected so far with no real loss there. But, that's how powerful some of these cards are and how well they all work together with these newer, more incredible designs. For Matthew here, we drew Expressive Iteration, which is, luckily a draw spell we can actually play into a Narset. Is Matthew kind of just hoping to price of progress or bust? I don't know exactly, how is he going to work through this situation now? And what are you thinking he needs to do?
I'm not sure there is now, honestly. I think price of progress is maybe where it is, but one of the cool things about Wasteland is you can Wasteland your own land in response to price of progress to get the Wasteland itself out of play and get another non-basic out of play. We can crack that Misty Rainforest for another basic to kind of half some of that damage too. So I'm not seeing how we can up to 16 from this point. And it's going to be more than 16 because that Uro is coming back before too long.
Yeah, and we're going to see, Matthew here just casting Expressive Iteration, triggering some prowess, trying to probably find like a bolt along those lines to maybe answer the Narset. Maybe you want to get a Force in order to protect your threats you have on the board, but kind of needs to find some more action because we cannot keep drawing lands. And we did find the Price of Progress, which is, the spell we just talked about maybe as the thing you have to find in this spot.
Yeah, that's step one. I don't know what the other steps are or how many there are,
but we know that's the first one.
Yes.
Uro gains some life, also puts more lands into play. It's a real dichotomy, which is always what's about in Legacy.
Yeah, a bit of give, a bit of take. Yeah,
exactly.
There is a chance we see Francisco ending up swordsing his own Uro off if we do end up all in on this price of progress. But I think we're going to see just swords, snap, flashback swords, just dealing with both of these threats. And if you can remove the permanent sources of damage, then price of progress is kind of stranded in your hand as this kind of bespoke lava spike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does look like we're going to maybe be protecting our Narset or our life total. It's unclear exactly who Matthew is attacking here, but I do know this, that if we want to stop it, we can. We swords the Brazen Borrower and we can get a jump block. Looks like we're choosing to take 2 in order to keep the 2 on the board. Makes a lot of sense.
It is funny to me that this Wasteland is just sitting in play on Francisco's side, and that makes sense because it is a price of progress insurance, but also you don't even want to fire that off because why remove an island that is powering your own Carpenter Flowers and giving you more mana to work with?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, oh, this is just +1 mana. Why would I use the Wasteland? That's supposed to give me +1 mana in the inverse way. And so we do see, if you're Matthew, you're salivating here. Get more non-basics in play. Tap that Wasteland. Let me rip another Price of Progress and hope it's enough. But Uro has hit the battlefield now, and it looks like, okay, I thought for a second they were maybe just gonna Legend Rule and Uro just get another 3 life, but we're just gonna hold up Veil and Swords and just be pretty happy with this annoying Narset still on the board. We tried to avoid the Narset last turn, right? And we tried to just be like, hey, we can't actually beat this Narset. We gotta go face on Francisco here. But that being the case, didn't really work out, and now we're gonna have to get through our draw spells like around things like Expressive Iteration. I am a little interested to see the Mystic Sanctuary on the Expressive Iteration. I don't know how many Matthew has. I thought that post pop might have been the way to actually beat the Uro player, but it looks like we're gonna have to try and get some more consistent forms of damage to actually beat Uro.
And that was a spot where wasting a volcanic island in response to the fetch could have actually stopped the Sanctuary from coming to play untapped and doing its thing. That faint hope you mentioned of what if we draw another Price of Progress, that's not happening. Only one copy in the sideboard. And so it is one and done there, and that Mystic Sanctuary is used and exposed. So really leaning hard on this Price of Progress to get the job done.
Yeah, maybe you're just going to race around the Uro and hope that, Francisco doesn't want to blow up your islands because of the Carpet Flower, like we mentioned, and then hoping that, like, hey, maybe I can daze pick up the Sanctuary. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Matthew kind of works through this. And for Francisco, once again, it's kind of like we talked about in round 1 with Jerry when he had his Uro in play. It's like, okay, I've got the Uro. I've kind of got the board stabilized for the most part. I've got my Mystic Sanctuary going. I can Wasteland my own Sanctuary and, like, pick it back up with things like Life in the Loam, which I think Francisco has one in the deck, along with the Field of the Dead. So it's like, how do I just make sure I don't lose to some random nonsense? How do I eke out that extra 0.01% of value and not die to something weird?
Yeah, wasting your own Sanctuary so you can loam it back and then put a second land on the same turn cycle with Uro. Some have compared to Splinter Twin. I'm not one of those people myself, but you can see why those comparisons get made.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it from the other side. But now we're seeing Carpet Flower here, and yeah, so we might see Francisco just kind of throw away an Uro, just put it in the graveyard, and against life. It looks like we're maybe actually sorting the Delver just to make sure that, hey, everyone on the ground can get blocked by the Snapcaster Mage if we need to, so no big worries there.
Yeah, I admire Vuk for his perseverance here.
Yeah, well, Vuk, it's doing for coverage. Vuk knows all the other rounds are done yet. It actually just came in one of the other ones. So, Vuk, you got a couple more minutes as a paid actor here. Don't worry, you're almost free. But, we'll see what exactly happens here. And Legend Shredder is a card that, as the evasion can maybe actually go over the top here. And we're seeing Price of Progress just save our spears, which I think actually makes a lot of sense, right? Like, it looks like Francisco's never going to tap out of this Wasteland. Has no real need to with the Carpet Flowers in place. So you're just going to have to get the damage you can. Unfortunately for Vuk, we do have the Force of Will.
Yeah, meanwhile, Jerry apparently using Pernicious to kill a Great Furnace, living his best life off camera here. So glad to see some people are enjoying their lot in life here at least.
You love to see it, that's for sure. And it looks like we've drawn a Turbinus, and we have decided that there should be no more creatures. Creatures are boring. But the upside, we did kill the Narset last turn. So this Ponder is now unlocked in our hand. And barring this Uro just ripping the second Narset in the deck off the top, we might have a chance to actually come back now. Because before the problem was we had one draw step a turn. This Uro is still going to be a thing you need to beat. But we couldn't actually, probably build up enough resources to fight through it. Now we have an outside chance of actually doing that.
Yeah, someone asked if Legacy without the BS means Legacy without the Brainstorms. Oh no, there are a lot of Brainstorms in this tournament. That is the best card in Legacy, potentially, definitely in Heritage as well. And we have our mono red prison gamers, and we have some elves and so on. But yeah, you're going to see a lot of Brainstorm decks, and if you're wanting to see that preserved as a pillar of the format, that's going to be true in Legacy or in Heritage, excuse me, as well.
100%. And let's see if we can find maybe like a threat and do an expressive iteration. If we do that, we're kind of back on top. And yeah, Brazen Borrower, it gets joked about a lot, right? In other formats, how it's just kind of like this card people play. It kind of answers a few things. Really, like, does it actually matter? I think in Legacy, just having a density and like flyers in this sort of deck and having weird outs kind of makes it so this card's like not the best thing you've ever seen, but totally reasonable. Something that kind of benefits from the lowering of power that the Heritage format has that you wouldn't see in normal Legacy.
Yeah, it's a nice theoretical out at least to something like a Chalice on one, which is shutting off an entire third of your deck, or cards like that, where just having that one thing, which maybe in a longer game between your brainstorms and your ponders and iterations, you actually have a decent consistency in finding that card. Having that theoretical out does go a long way. In this game, though, this is not. Oh dear God.
Oh, Veil of Summer. Oh no, that's one of the cards you would think wouldn't be here, but it is.
And then Days off the top, the perfect top deck, just to mark poor Matthew Vogt there on the way out of that game.
Yeah, Francisco winning 2-0. That was our last match. I'm going to double check everything, just make sure everyone's good to go in this next round. I'm going to throw that next round so we won't have much time between everything. But Dom, Veil of Summer. We haven't got to talk about that card yet. That card is so messed up, and it is surprisingly in a lot of the decks today, or maybe unsurprisingly, if you think about how messed up it actually is.
Yeah, there are a lot of cards which are pretty messed up left in the format, and you Veil of Summer, a card which was sincerely in the ban discussion at various points in Legacy, already kicked out of the building in Pioneer and so on. And I think right now in current Legacy, it's worked its way back into the place where you don't even see it that often, and when you do it, it doesn't feel that egregious. But how much of that is just we've become so numb after all of these these cards coming in over the past few years that a card like Veil of Summer, which would have been format shattering back in 2017, 2018, kind of feels like just another card at this point.
100%. And we are just put up our new round pairings here. We'll let Honorog kind of pick between our two undefeated players and which one we're going to watch this round. So with the way it kind of works in the tournament, it looks like it is going to be a couple people playing their win and ends for top four today right now. So we have Jerry versus Jonathan, and we have JR versus Phil Gallagher in our undefeated spots in the tournament. So we followed two of those players already. So we're probably going to get some overlap no matter what. But still a lot of people at large. You know, we have Francisco versus Caleb Durwood right now in the control mirror match going on. So that's going to be pretty exciting. So we're probably going to get to check in with them later. But you have Brian Cook versus Brian Koval. You have Michael Majors. I'm sorry, Michael Mass. I didn't mean to say Majors there. Yeah, Majors is tagged in. Matt need to use the bathroom. This is an MM. We're allowed to change it up. No, versus Newton. And so a lot of really cool matches going on. We're going to have a lot more Legacy to show you. Still 2 more rounds left here in the Swiss and top 4. It's brought to you by Man Traders. Thank you so much, Man Traders, for sponsoring this event. If you haven't got Man Traders yet and you're wanting to play Legacy, you know, in normal Legacy, maybe you want to play some Heritage with your friends, or maybe, you know, your community, someone watching this, and you're like, hey, I want to do Heritage tournaments like this. Maybe I should do something like that. One of the best ways to play that is Magic Online, and you can use Man Traders. Do that, and you can use code LegacyRocks to get 10% off your first 2 months over at Man Traders. So make sure to check that out. I think we're probably just ready to hop in there and watch one of our players. We're actually going to cut to a break real quick just to make sure everything's set up as our midway point for the tournament. So we'll be back here in just a couple minutes. And we're back after our short break here. We're going to spend just a little bit of time before we hop into the matches, kind of talking about this format. Don, what deck and what has been impressing you the most so far in this Heritage format, and kind of what's drawing your eye if you were going to play a tournament with this with your friends somewhere, maybe at your LGS or maybe on Magic Online in your Discord?
Yeah, we've seen this mono red Stompy deck just be brutally efficient as it is in Legacy, carrying that over to Heritage, where it's effectively the same deck. No surprises there. But that one kind of feels like old news at this point. We have Jerry just reliving all of his glory days with this Assassin's Trophy Days combo deck, as he referred to it, and just playing some old favorites, some new favorites, really living his best life. And then what we're going to see, hopefully in this upcoming feature match before too long, is Sneak and Show, piloted by maybe the best Sneak and Show player in the world, and a deck which has fallen out of favor for the most part. Our player here, JPA93, Jonathan Angelescu, one of the few people who can still put up consistent results with it. And I know certainly when I was experimenting in Legacy and trying to get into the format, it was, going to have to bite the bullet and get into Volcanic Islands. But when I do, this is what I want to play. And so I'm keen to see if this can do well in this slightly more forgiving version of Legacy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this, like, in the early, like, let's say 2012 to 2014, this was a huge part of the format and kept things like lands in check. We didn't have any players come in really with lands today. We saw a little bit of that with Jerry's deck, has some of the characteristics of that with Life Alone and Wasteland. Same with Francisco's deck. You have some elements of that. But for the most part, the Dark Depth stuff didn't really show up today, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about, which was, got some pretty reasonable upgrades over the years, like Elvish Reclaimer and stuff like that. But this deck kind of checked those decks, and is just sort of one of the most like, hey, if I'm playing a format, I don't really maybe know exactly what everyone else is going to do. I know this deck is consistent and powerful. This is one of the most consistently powerful things you can do, even when you consider things like Storm, right? Like just getting this out on turn 2 to something like a City, Ancient Tomb, and then where City of Traders with Volcanic Island, and you just slam a Grizzlebrand or slam an Emrakul. Most decks can't beat that.
Yeah, we have a few different approaches to combo in this tournament. You have Storm, which is this engine combo deck, all of the pieces working together, generating a bunch of mana, converting that into other resources in some way. Then you have a deck like Doomsday, this namesake combo deck, if you like, where I'm going to cast my card Doomsday and then figure it out from there. This is almost like a classic A plus B kind of combo deck. I have my Sneak Attack and Show and Tell over here, got my Grizzlebrand and my Emrakul over here. I need something from column A, something from column B, and then I'm going to back it up with the brainstorms and the ponders that you would expect, and a smattering of disruption in Forcible, and 4 main deck Spell Pierce, I think, is one of the big takeaways here as well.
Yeah, a huge statement seeing for that card. We have Jerry's deck up again. This is once again the type control deck we saw in round 1. Kind of classic Jerry Thompson deck. I think if you expect to see Jerry play Legacy, this is kind of what you would expect. It's either this or something completely broken that he discovered. This deck, though, kind of interesting in the face of Sneak and Show. You have some disruption, right? Like things like Hypnotoric Thoughtseize. You have obviously Force So Well and Daze right through there, but there's also some cards you've gained that got really big, had big implications. Like Leonis Triumph is a way to actually beat an Emrakul, where normally this deck would be cold to it. But we're gonna jump on down to the feature match right now. And it looks like JPA Jonathan is on the play, and it does look like we have a turn to a Big Fatty if we can find some way to put it in. We currently are missing that part of the combo, but we have everything else.
Yeah, it's a classic Sneak and Show hand of, it looks pretty good, but I do need to find that Show and Tell or that Sneak and be able to force it through. And then this matchup as a whole, this is a classic Legacy matchup, right? Sultai cards versus Show and Tell. This is SCG Tour, bread and butter for 2013, and we're getting to relive that here in the 2020s.
100%. And Jerry, no stranger to that, obviously, really made his name doing this exact thing here. And we see him have, Daze Force and Tarmogoyf. It's hard to imagine much more for Jerry there. This is kind of like what his deck can produce when it comes to being this deck efficiently. This is the best.
Yeah, this is a fast threat backed up by at least one hard counter. If we find another blue card, we have a Wasteland as well. Even if we don't find that extra blue card, Daze plus Wasteland potentially can. That's a classic combination. Yep. Can help to stymie Jonathan's fastest starts here. So we have some of that extra mana. 2 copies of City of Traders potentially. We've got Forcible. We have Spellpierce. We can maybe win that fight when it comes, but we need to find that Show and Tell, that Sneak Attack, the missing combo piece that to start the fight in the first place.
100%. Yeah, we saw him kind of keep some of the fatties, even kept 2 of them, right? It was like, hey, I could send away one of these, but I might need that decision point between Emrakul versus Grizzlebrand, depending on how these things sort of go. And we see Jared here just kind of wasting and getting his points in, just like as you do with Tarmogoyf. But, JPA is going to get to fetch to get some new cards on top, but Jared drew Jace, so, he's going to have some way to actually pull really far ahead in cards and maybe even start controlling Jonathan's draw step in a couple turns. And on the other hand, it has double force back up now. So it's going to be super interesting to see how this game folds out.
And Jace used to be one of those go-to responses that could answer a show and tell in Emrakul in the early turn. So a kind of hidden mode on Jace coming into play here as well. Right now, I think its main use is going to be, this is the blue card I can pitch to my backup Force Will when that fight comes.
Yeah, the strongest thing in all of Legacy, being able to pitch your Force Will, makes a card playable. We drew Life in the Loam here, so not only is this going to, get back the Wasteland and keep Jonathan off having the mana to actually spell pierce and do everything, at least if you're on Jerry's side of the table, but it's also going to start growing the Tarmogoyf as we dredge and find more and more cards.
Yeah, I imagine we're sitting on this for now, not even eating that volcanic card.
That is interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to see I'm wondering what that whole thing is. Maybe Jerry's trying to prioritize getting Jace in play to actually beat an Emrakul. Just like he's decided, whatever, hit it now. It's fine. And we already drew the show and tell. So now it's time to fight. And we do have Spell Pierce plus Force Up.
Yeah, so we're going to see a pretty big stack, I think, developing here.
Yeah, it's going to be super interesting to see exactly how this comes out here. Jerry's looking to start with Force. Makes sense with the Lotus Petal up. Can't quite daze. And look like Jerry's deciding, am I picking second Force or am I pitching this Jace? And it looks like I'm going to take a little bit of time to think about it. I assume you probably pitch the Jace since you kind of have the pressure already going, but maybe, Jerry's way more experienced in the match. Maybe he kind of knows, like, actually, I need Jace to kind of refuel if I assume, Jonathan has one of his 4 main deck spell pierces.
Is there any consideration to pitching the other Force? I mean, it sounds absurd, but yeah, it looks like we're just pitching the Jace, which it seems like, okay, we're trading off our forces, then we have Spell Pierce for the next one. It seems like we're going to have some big idiot entering play before too.
Yeah. I think, Jerry might pitch Force to Force if we didn't have that Lotus Petal up, but with Daze in the hands of the backup still, he can't quite do that. And we see Jerry here dazing, and it looks like things are going well for Jerry, except we have Force for Force. And so now Show and Tell is going to resolve, and really kind of comes down to which is JJ going to put into play, and can Jerry draw the one of Liliana's Triumph off the top if he decides to put Emrakul in play?
Yeah, so that's the consideration now. Do you go for Emrakul and the almost guaranteed win if you get to attack and resolve that Annihilator trigger, versus the Grizzlebrand where you could maybe draw some cards and like set up this second wave through a Triumph or something, but there's more downside to that too. Looks like we just have Grizzlebrand, and I say just in air quotes here, more than good enough in most games, and that's why this deck is so effective at doing its thing.
Yeah, now if Jerry does have like his Assassin's Trophy or his Liliana's Triumph, it might not be enough. He might just draw 7, find another Force, or just recoup, put another Show and Tell into play. So it's gonna be interesting to see kind of what happens here. And it looks like Jonathan's considering just drawing 7 right now, and it looks like he's gonna do that and see if there's anything he can do with this extra burst of cards.
And what he finds is another Forcible and another blue card. So even if there is a top deck Triumph for Jerry, we have that covered. And Grizzlebrand, I think, to close this out.
100% here, yeah. Looks like Jerry's just going to fall too far behind. Even if, you try to race with Tarmogoyf, Grizzlebrand is a lifelinker. So, and Jerry just drawing another land off the top. Not exactly what you want to be seeing in this spot.
In this matchup, back in the day, it could come up sometimes that you would get that 7 Tarmogoyf. Just missing the trouble there, but you would have your Liliana or something. You would have Goddess Agent because that card was legal in Legacy. It's not legal in Heritage. But Tarmogoyf looking puny next to the 7/7 Grizzlebrand here.
Yep, and we're gonna see the Grizzlebrand connect, and even without the card draw, just the 7 life is probably gonna put this out of reach here. We are gonna see sneak attack in a couple turns too. So even if Jerry tries to fight through everything, and we force back, blah blah blah. We're going to have the sneak attack from the Emrakul. So Jerry's going to need to have something really good happen. And Jonathan, once again, we talk about the other players, is probably just going to be like, yeah, let's make sure I don't lose any percentage points. Let's just really type this game up and make sure we cross the finish line. maybe we're just gonna actually show and tell in Emberclaw too.
Yeah,
Just
backup threat if somehow something
the best way to beat
first one.
Liliana's Triumph is just have another creature to sacrifice. How
Sure
to
is.
beat Edict, yeah. And we're just gonna see a Ponder, probably actually just setting up like more spell pierces and stuff. Jokes aside, got a lot, yeah. And before Spell Pierce main deck, it's gonna be really easy to kind of fight these battles. And Spell Pierce is a card that you don't see like 4 Spell Pierce decks really these days, despite being such an efficient card. There's things like Solitude which gets around them, and just other cards that are bigger parts that you can't actually fight with Spell Pierce. And you have things like Force Negation. We don't really need to have Spell Pierce. So we see Jonathan take that game down. And let's hop over to Jerry's sideboard here. So Jerry, once again, has Carpet of Flowers, Veil of Summers, Nightclubber, Narset, Part of Veils, and Spell Pierce all time stew. They have a single Hymn, Fatal Push, Liliana's Triumph, Nihil Spellbomb, and Pernicious Deed. Dom, I know we kind of joked about Liliana's Triumph before. I think that card's probably going to come in. What else do you think is going to come in this matchup?
Yeah, in this matchup, Triumph is no joke. That's the card you want. So definitely want that second copy. The Hymn, the Spell Pierces, the Narsets, I imagine, will all come in. And then if you have room, and just scanning Jerry's deck here, there aren't that many dead cards. And this is Jerry T boarding in action, right? You don't want to have an abundance of dead Fatal Pushes or what have you. You want to be able to cleanly map your cards in, cards out. If you have room, Carpet and Veil of Summer. I think Veil in particular are both good options too.
100%, yeah. So you're going to have a lot of different options there and kind of being able to fight through these things. And Carpet, maybe let them cheat and get out one of these bigger cards early, which would be pretty exciting. Maybe we'll see the fabled Hardcast Shark Typhoon. That's how you stop a Grizzlebrand. It's a bunch of little sharks,
And hey, Legacy is a format where, thanks to Carpet of Flowers, Hardcast Shark Typhoon is a very
100%.
If you want it to be.
Meanwhile, in Sneak and Show, we have 3 Pyroclasm, 2 Figures Cage, 2 Magus of the Moon, 2 Sorcerer Spyglass, 2 Stifle, an Echo Truth, Omniscience, Pyroblast, and Red Elemental Blast as our cyber cards. Dom, what are you thinking about from this sideboard in this sort of matchup?
I'm looking at Magus of the Moon. Back in the day, this was how, in a lot of matchups, your Seek and Show deck would go from a 2-card combo deck to a 1-card. You would play your Blood Moon, play your Magus of the Moon, and that would often just dominate the game or end the game by itself. And you look at Jerry's deck list, there are 0 basic lands. So if that Magus is in play and Jerry has, doesn't have a form of pressure on the board or doesn't have some immediate answer, like that's lights out. That's game over.
100%. This would be really interesting to see how that one sideboards there. I have to think that, like you mentioned, there aren't a whole lot of dead cards in Jerry's deck, but there aren't a whole lot of cards that just kind of slammed the door. And he kind of had sort of his best kind of draw in that game. A bunch of protection, a threat, Tarmogoyf. Really always missing like a discard spell kind of, but even then, it's hard to ask for everything. How do you feel like this matchup is like? Who do you think is favored going into game 2 here?
I would say I think Jerry improves more than Jonathan does. I think gets more options in its sideboard, and that's kind of the dynamic you expect, right? Where the combo deck is going to have a bit of an advantage in game 1, and then have to struggle a bit more in the post-sideboard games, but you just need to pick up one of the two if you win that game 1. So I think the matchup is going to be closer here, but I imagine Jonathan still feels pretty good about that spot.
100%. And it looks like Jerry has a hand that just lands some forces. We saw him keep a hand kind of like this in round 1, but the rules of engagement are a little bit different here, so I'm going to be surprised if we see that from him. Meanwhile, on Jonathan's side, we kind of have it all again, right? We have the Ancient Tomb, the Lotus Petal, and the Show and Tell with Force backup, and the Grizzlebrand. I can't imagine many hands better than this. Can you, Dom?
This hand is absolutely phenomenal. And there are many ways where it can improve even further. Like we find another Spell Pierce, we find something else. And on Jerry's side, okay, you have a Forcible, but you have nothing else. You need that mix of disruption and pressure. Jerry knows that. I imagine we're going to see Jerry mulligan aggressively for what he needs, and this could be another one here as well, but I think the upside on this hand is enough to make it worth it.
Yeah, it looks like Jerry's going to, keep a hand that's a little light on lands, but, where it's a 5-card hand, we can't go much lower, and we do have Inquisition to double him, and typically, Hymn to Torak is such a powerful card in this matchup that this goes on here, and it's a really interesting point for Jonathan, right? Like, do I force this and just try and slam? Jerry's down to 3 cards. Does Jerry have Force plus blue card or Daze maybe, So we're going to have to see how this all plays out here. Looks like Jonathan is going to force pitching Brainstorm.
Yeah, just really protecting that Show and Tell, which like he has for this turn 1 combo rolled up here.
Yeah, it looks
but now this is a kind of an interesting recall, but if you wait a turn, you have that protection with the Spell Pierce, and so we might see him decide, okay, no, we're just jamming.
Just jam. I kind of like it, whatever. Jerry's on like no cards, vs Force, whatever. Jerry, you get a Tarmogoyf, I get a Grizzlebrand. I think this is fair and fun. How about you? And he's gonna pass back to Jerry, and even if Jerry draws, I think if Jerry could tutor his deck here, he might be in trouble. And we're seeing Jonathan just be like, yeah, draw 7, get some more cards. Let's see what I can do and see if I can overwhelm him.
Yeah, it is weird to think that just saw a protected turn 1 Grizzlebrand in Legacy is somehow broke now for not being fast enough for. That's top of the range. Most games are not like that, and there are some weaknesses which these newer cards have introduced into the format. But if you draw like that every game, play Sneak and Show, and you will be absolutely rewarded.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think is super strong about choosing a deck like this is, hey, even if you have a bad matchup, you could have hands like that. And there's something in Magic we don't really talk about enough, right? Of having this breakthrough potential of like, hey, there's a bad matchup. I need to be able, like my deck has bad matchups. My deck needs to be able to get through those. And some decks, you just can't, you just fold and you can't actually get your pieces together. This deck does have enough speed and just raw power that like, no matter how bad the matchup is, I can stick an Emrakul and maybe you just die, or I can Grizzlebrand and stick a bunch of things. We're going to set up our backup feature match right now and switch over to that. But yeah, Sneak and Show, one of the more powerful decks. Looks like it's going to be a lock for our top 4 today. Really cool to see Jonathan take the deck he's kind of known for, put it into a modern classic times sort of view here with Heritage, and all the way to top 4. It's going to be exciting to see him play that out here in a little bit. Our backup match seems to be XJ Cloud JR again. We have Mono Red Prison. Oh, sorry, this is Painter. I misspoke. I'm so sorry. Yeah, this is our Painter player. I don't know what I was thinking. Dom, Painter is a deck that we talked about before. It's jumped on the scene before. It kind of came back in recent times. How do you think about it in sort of Heritage format?
I really like it. You lose some options. No Urza Saga, I think, is the big one from MH2, and a few more marginal things. Goblin Engineer, a big part of recent builds, not on the table here. And so without some of those slots for, there's more room to splash another color, to explore some of these other options. And so you see this small white splash, the strawberry shortcake, as a lot of Painter enthusiasts call it. We see the Enlightened Shooter, the Aethersworn Canonist, which can be a big deal against elves, and then Portable Hole in the Sideboard even. So a lot of interesting angles open up here, and this is a deck which I personally like a lot, and it's good to see, and it's hyper flexible too. So this Painter deck will look very different from a Painter deck that you see at some other Legacy tournament or Heritage tournament. That's what kind of keeps it interesting to me.
100%, yeah. And Callium Master, this deck that we talked about earlier in the stream, really plays and piles it a lot. So it's gonna be really cool to see it there. Meanwhile, the other player I believe is playing Elves, if I have my stuff correct. Testacular here playing Elves, my favorite deck in Legacy. I love this deck, and it's gotten some new innovations in recent times. So a lot of the old classic stuff, but we see 4 Elvish Reclaimers, and it's kind of stuff that comes along with that, right? Like Bajuka Bog or Caracas in the sideboard. Don, what do you think about Elves in this sort of Heritage format?
I like it, and there's an interesting backstory here. So in normal Legacy, Elves had this fork in the road where you could keep doing the combo focus, Nettle Sentinel, Glimpse of Nature thing, or you could do what another Elves competitor in this tournament, Newton Hung, and lean harder on Elvish Reclaimer and more of this flexible mid-rangey deck, a little slower, but it still had some combo potential. And Newton has really gone deep down the rabbit hole in turning that into more of a mid-range deck. And it feels like every time I look at his latest list, he's cut more Elves and he's leaning into this toolbox angle. So this is not Elves, this is Elves. This is your classic Glimpse of Nature, Heritage Druid, killing you turn 2, turn 3, culminating in some big behemoth. And the thing is, you still see Elvish Reclaimer, but maybe part of that is without Allosaurus Shepherd, those 4 locked in slots are not spoken for anymore. So you kind of get to have your cake and eat it too. You can do the Nettle Sentinel thing, but you can also do this toolboxy Elvish Reclaimer thing as
well. 100%, yeah. So it's gonna be really exciting to see that. Let's see if we can hop on down to the game and see it all in action. But one thing I will say before we get down in there is that I love combo Elves, I love Glimpse, and it's cool to see. And also, we're watching Testacular this round. We're gonna probably be seeing Newton in a later round, especially if he keeps it up. But Fiend Artisan is still in this format, so we saw he didn't bring us the current Elves, but into the Heritage thing and say, like, maybe this is just kind of the way to do things. Like, sure, Glimpse, Natural Order, really strong cards, but maybe I don't even need Allosaurus Shepherd. I can just kind of burst through and play those sort of mid-range games in different ways. And so I don't need to do that. Gaia's Cradle is really strong after all.
And you see one aspect of the Elves deck is it's kind of doing its thing and being focused in the main deck, and then the sideboard is almost exclusively these anti-combo cards or these one-offs that you can find with your Elvish Reclaimer. And that's kind of how it goes. You're a little bit slower, a little bit behind against the faster combo decks. You can claw some of that back in sideboard.
100% here. And we're seeing the classic for Elves, turn 1 Green Sun Zenith, grab Dryad Arbor. Really, these are some of your best cards, Dom, when it comes to Elves. Getting that Dryad Arbor in play has so many different ways, like Quirion Ranger, Nettle Sentinel, to kind of burst your head on mana and set up those combo draws.
And City of Traders, a big pickup for Callum, who had this one lander which needed some extra mana to develop. Having this 2-mana land, it's going to let him cast that turn 2 Fable after the Goblin Welder, a perfect curve. One interesting thing we see here is Pyrokinesis in the hand, which has been not even upgraded necessarily, but replaced by F.I.R.E, of course, from MH2 in a lot of the contemporary paint decks. F.I.R.E's not on the table, so we go back to Pyrokinesis, but that card is actually better in the Elves matchup because the instant speed means if they're trying to stitch some Heritage Druid turn together, you can wipe their board, wipe the Heritage Druid, and just clean up everything at instant speed.
Yeah, we might see that here right now where it's just, yeah, I'll blow up your 2 lands. You missed your land for turn. You don't even have a Gaia's Cradle. And I'm just going to kind of wipe that thing and move on, like we've seen from F.I.R.E in the past. Pyrokinesis is kind of doing it first and, doing it a lot cleaner. But we also are really close to actually just having the combo here, right? Like, we have one half of it already.
Yeah, so we get to, okay, wipe your board for with all of the stuff left over. Like, this is exactly what Callum is hoping for. You can't draw it up much better than.
Yeah, and we do have another Green Sun Zenith, but we don't have any more Dryad Arbors in our deck. So we're kind of in this really awkward spot spectacular where you kind of have to, just play your Elves and hope this Heritage Druid in your hand is eventually going to get there with, maybe ripping something like a Gaia's Cradle off the top. But we do get to see Fable the Mirror Breaker finally in action, Dom.
Yeah, we get to sit through this redundant grindstone that we don't need, dig deep. One thing to consider here is the heritage restriction means no Modern Horizons, and that means no Force Trigger and no Collector for Zenith target. So this build of Elves actually a little weaker against some of these artifact-based strategies.
100%, yeah. Typically a matchup that's, probably a little favorite combo. Elves does kind of turn on its head when you don't have those insano hammer cards you could play. And we do see Testacular kind of taking a slower approach. Could have played Birchlore Ranger and played maybe another elf. But if they did that, they would be tapping down on the Elvish Reclaimer, not even to mention this from Canist and play they got cast. So we can only do one spell a turn. So it's going to be kind of a grindy-ish game here from the Painter player. Get it down? Grindy? It's because the stone, you're...
Oh, I got it. I just was anyway.
It's a lag. I could probably just lag, and you were laughing a bunch for sure. Yeah. No doubt.
On the inside for sure. But you're seeing the draw to the White Splash here with the Canonist, which you can see how effective it is against the Elves deck. Also against some of these other combo decks in the field, like your Doomsdays, your Storms, even Seek and Show sometimes. This is a nice proactive thing you can shoot it for to have some leverage there.
Yeah, we might see, our once upon a time an end of turn in order to find Gaia's Cradle, get the Green Sun Zenith, and maybe find Cradle of Behemoth here in a couple turns off the Druid. A lot of different ways that you can kind of take this, but really once you find Gaia's Cradle, things are going good. It looks like we're going to be Green Sun Zenithing to find another Nettle Sentinel. Okay, so maybe hoping to once upon a time find some sort of way to answer the Aether Storm Canonist and then just kind of combo off from there.
Yeah, this looks like Zenith for 3, which I think means Rex Age, because again, no Grist, no, some of these options off the table. So we can get Rex Age, but this is where Goblin Welder really shines, because if you get Canonist, well, Callum can just swap any artifact in play, like that Grindstone, just back for the Canonist at instant speed to shut off any further shenanigans.
100%, yeah. And I believe you can swap tokens too, right? Like the Goblin Shaman itself can just actually, die for the cause as you would, and then get back our Aether Storm Canonist and make it to go through this again. We do have the Nettle Sentinel in hand for Testacular here, so that is going to make it that we can kind of fight through things a little bit, but it's really hard to do that unless you have the Nettle Sentinel already in play. So we do see the Rex Age, and we see it actually just going after Reflection of the Kiki Jiki.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that doesn't have this immunity conferred on it by. So that makes a lot of sense. And Callum missing one of his combo pieces here, no Painter 7, but one of the nice things about Grindstone is if the game is slowing to a crawl like this, you can start activating that Grindstone on yourself to look at that missing piece.
100%. and we see, Callium back.
Second Canonist. Wow.
Okay, all right. Nothing to see here, just 2 Canonists. And, Testacular is probably going to need something like Craterhoof Behemoth plus Gaia's Cradle pretty soon. Because, like you mentioned, we're getting closer and closer to just milling the Painter and then bringing it back with the Welder.
And the moment we do, we have Pyroblast as this 1-mana, Vindicate / counter spell that can give you that layer of protection. Again, not that there's much to protect it from in a world without cards like Force of Vigor.
100%, yeah. And so it's really not Testacular here. We see it actually having like trade with this Goblin Shaman in order to make sure that, hey, I can't afford you to like keep carrying these artifacts and that mana and find Painter. Shriek Maw.
So this actually was a new. It does a lot, specifically against stuff like Delta in the present day, killing Murktides, and also against artifact creatures. It has that old templating with the F.I.R.E and that restriction that used to be on some of this black removal, which means you couldn't really kill the Canonist even if you wanted to. So that one's earmarked for Goblin Water instead.
100%, yeah. And it's so funny, Dom. The Elves deck in Legacy has to have some of the worst mana of any monocolor deck in all of history. Obviously we're stuck on lands here, but even without it, we do not have many ways to actually like do much outside of Gaia's Cradle here. And so, we found a Copter here for Callium, so that's going to help us get dig deeper and deeper for the Painter. But, we finally see Reclaimer get activated and probably find the Cradle. And, we're getting dangerously close to maybe winning the game.
It's going to be hard to stitch something together, but like drawing Natural Order, right? Or drawing...
Boseiju?
Maybe, but this is back in the same spot again, right? Where what do you hit with the stage?
Yeah, I guess you have to sort of just spend a couple turns working through the Canonists, and then eventually you can kind of get your thing. But if you can set up to find the hoof or just have it so if you top in the hoof you can actually win, that can be pretty strong here. Obviously, the Painter player is getting closer and closer to actually winning the game. But you have to do something, and you got to start working through those cards somehow. And it looks like we're just getting another grindstone.
Both players kind of demonstrating a loop. Curran has Wildwood Symbiote bouncing and replaying the Reclamation stage every turn. Meanwhile, Callum just has 2 Goblin Boulders spotting whatever gets targeted by that in and out to protect it from that.
I guess even if you tried to kill the Canonist, you just turn the station back into the Canonist. So
yeah,
yikes.
So we're in this weird holding pattern where nothing too much is going on, but the moment that Callum finds the missing piece, whether it's Painter or something else, then the whole game just breaks open.
100%. And it's gonna kind of be on Testacular to figure out some way to burst through this. We do have once upon a time to look at 5 cards in a turn, so that could be the beginning of something there. But Callium has only 36 cards left in their deck, and that's getting really close. You have 4 Painters. It's not like you play a Painter. You have a influx. You have a lot of that card. So let's see. Spirit Guide. That's a lot like a Painter. It looks to have like a paintbrush in hand. But this is a card that does not see much play in any format, but has consistently been banned out of lower formats like Standard and Pioneer. Gives you a lot of consistency and a lot of power on turn 2.
Yeah, some would argue we could parole that one in Pioneer. Sure. Nice to see it in this one exact deck in Legacy. This is really the only context in larger formats where it even gets a look in.
Yeah, and that's so cool. It's one of the awesome parts about Magic, right? Is like we can have formats like this. We can play something like Copter, and it's one of the things that I think a lot of players don't like about traditional Legacy, and why we're doing an event like today, where it's like I can't play stuff like this when there are things like the Modern Horizon cards. It's just too strong. It's like why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah, that's always been the debate: is how much do you want new cards to actually have an impact on the format? There are definitely some people who would quite happily play Legacy in this kind of stasis as it existed 5 or 10 years ago. But I think most people do want to see new stuff coming in, but maybe like a handful of cards each set, nothing that's going to really revolutionize the format. And the kind of deluge of stuff that we've seen with the Commander sets, with Horizons over the past few years has really gone against that, where now it feels like you can run the numbers and some of like the 4-color decks or the Delver decks in Legacy these days, half the spells are from the past year and a half, for example. Like at that point, it feels like too much for people.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Is there anything like, can this Boseiju end up mattering when it comes to the actual combo? Can we do it to like get the painter off the board for a second before the grindstone resolves, or is that kind of like too wishful thinking?
If Callum kind of gets careless, I guess, then maybe that could happen. But with the two, there's basically never going to be a window where the activation is going on, but the painter isn't in play. And so the Zenith is potentially a big draw here, where now, even though we can only cast one spell a turn, we can set up for just manual Zenith into Craterhoof Behemoth. And you're putting me to the test here with the algebra, but I think that's going to be good enough.
Yeah, Craterhoof kind of squares it, so it'd be 36 damage, across each creature. That's going to do a really good job. Well, 36 across all of them, sorry. So with Trample, you'll get there. And we see actually Boseiju just saying, hey, you're not finding the painter. I need to like buy time. I'm maybe like closer than it looks to actually killing you. And so I need you just to like deny that one draw step. And this card isn't going to get much better than this.
Yeah, and that one draw could be big. Even if it's not painter, think about if it's another pyrokinesis, for example, right? Like there are a lot of draws that could bust this game wide open. So just denying one of those is maybe not the use you had in mind for your Boseiju ideally, but like in this situation, it's it's the right way to use it.
Yeah, and you blow up the City of Traders, which makes it a little less of the grind.
What? Well, no, you don't. Here's the thing, because it's when you play a land. So
okay, I haven't had that happen before. All right, interesting.
Yeah,
we all learn something.
Yeah, like when you play these decks, you have to check yourself. Where it's like, oh, I just cracked my Scalding Tarn. Am I losing a land? You have to get in that mindset.
Yeah, clearly they should have looked at that. And I see a couple colorless cards milled there with the stone. Are either of those painter? I think it might be. Maybe not. A little hard to see the graveyard. I think if Callium had the win, Callium would go for it. Not anything like force negation like we talked about before to play around. So for the most part, gonna be pretty good there. And probably has to be a guy cradle off the top here.
Well, let's see. So we have 5 mana there, 6, and then Heritage Druid gets it to 9. That's exactly
Hoof.
It is exactly Hoof. And yeah, the Sentinel's going to untap, the Symbiote can untap something else, and that's going to be for dummy thick, I believe is the technical term, attackers with trample, which is I think going to be enough here. Okay, so now we're grindstoning. Yeah, so I wasn't sure if we were grindstoning the opponent to try and mill the, or grindstoning ourselves in this Hail Mary to try and find that painter at the last possible moment.
Yeah, it looks like it might have been on ourselves there. There were 2 copies of Hoofs, so it's going to be kind of a lot in order to mill there and get both Hoofs. And with the untap here, I think that is lethal. There's 4 creatures. They all got +6, and so that's 24 damage, and that's more than enough to get through there. It looks like we're going to go into the next game. When it comes to Callium sideboard here, we have a lot of interesting cards. We kind of talked about them earlier, but we'll go back over them again real quick here. We have the Pyrokinesis, we saw do some great work in that game. Blood Moon, Surgical Extraction, Snaring Bridge, Ether Storm Canist, again, Grindstone, Microsynth Pithing Needle, Portable Hole, Tormod Script, and Torpor Orb. Don, what are you kind of liking in this matchup from that sideboard?
So Pyrokinesis, obviously we saw it do some great work that game, ditto for the Canonist, and you mentioned how weak the Elves mana base is, and Blood Moon can really accentuate even further. So if there's room, I would expect those to come in too, and then there's always this debate with a Karn deck of, if you have an appealing target, when do you want to bring that in, when do you want to leave that in the board? So something like Portable Hole, for example, might be a little bit too slow to Karn and then find that, and then it's, well, how often am I doing that instead of just finding something else? So maybe that one works its way into the main deck. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I could totally see that, just having a little bit more interaction and making sure, like, hey, don't get gun underneath of, it's kind of a race we're both racing. But as we saw in that game, kind of had a good lock, slowed things down honestly, as probably as best you can without having the absolute stone colds. And so it's like not enough because the Elf set can fight through that when it has huge burst cards like Gaia's Cradle. So it's going to be interesting to see how Callium sideboard's there. As for...
And to clarify, we do have a illegal card potentially on the screen there, the one in Recruiter. That is a slightly outdated deck list. Callum was alerted to this last minute and did update that. So
that is a spirit guide in actuality. Yeah.
Yes.
So we have 3 spirit guides in the deck. we're going fast.
But
Anyways,
that's another card which we saw it injected into modern and into affordability for the most part via MH2 over the
mhm,
past year and a half. But before that, it was in Portal 3 Kingdoms in, I want to say, like 98, 99, like that.
yeah,
So easy to miss the exact origin of these cards sometimes.
100%. Speaking of the exact origins of these cards, however, Blood Moon got printed. It's here now, and it's on turn one. And that is not good news for Testacular, who I believe has two basics in the deck. I can double check real quick. Yeah, it's exactly two forests, so we might be in trouble.
Just uncastable down in the void, especially uncastable mocking coming off the top of the deck. And yeah, we like we mentioned, Blood Moon so effective. Excuse me, against the Elves mana base, effective against frankly most decks in Legacy, especially on the play. And this is almost playing out more like a red prison or red zombie deck. Callum just turned on that thing, didn't have much left over, but it looks like he might not need it.
Yeah,
This game
and
goes.
Testacular, luckily does have the Heritage Druids and stuff. So if we draw the forest, we can maybe burst out enough mana to actually play through this Blood Moon, especially with Callium just flooding out right now, just has a bunch of lands and an uncastable spell in hand. So there is a chance that this is gonna work out, but we do need to draw the forest probably the next turn or two, assuming Callium is able to draw spells.
And we're going to see this clock quicken substantially here with the addition of.
The Spirit Guide, yeah, that might be the one that would have been an Imperial Critter, So this is so much better. Now we get to get the beats on as we draw a glimpse of nature here for Testacular.
I
Probably
think
have
we
to move to
are
discourage.
shamefully discarding this ley line to hand size. Yeah. And okay, there's a Painter Witch right now. That's a 1/3. That's a, I don't know what the limited comparison would be. Maritime Guard. But that's kind of what you need.
Yeah, it's really all that's going on here, and everything's blue now, so we have all that going on, and we're in a really bad spot here. And we once again, this is a spot where current legacy, you rip, your Force of Vigor, you kill the Painter and the Blood Moon, we move on, and we can actually play. Here we don't have those, free cards that just completely change how the games are played and make the game kind of weird.
Yeah, if there was a Force of it, it almost doesn't matter which card you replace, and you force a blue turn, you unlock your hand, you probably went on the spot on that turn. So uh, you really see how you can question whether Force of Vigor and cards like it are a net positive for the format, but you certainly feel the lack of them in spots like this.
100%. And it looks like we're just, continuing the beatdowns. We discard a Shriekmaw. We have the station. We're doing all that we can. This is why
Yeah.
Gruul Elves is clearly the best build, obviously.
I mean, Elf has in the past splashed Blood Moon in its sideboard against X like lands. So, they've been on the right end of this a few times.
That is totally a way to describe being on the Blood Moon end. On the right end. But it looks like, we're going to need to draw that forest sooner
Well,
than later.
I think the
Station.
forest is in the graveyard because what we saw was this is a neat trick you can do with Goblin Welder is you can activate and then weld it
Oh.
out for the painter in response. And we saw Callum had no other artifacts at that point, but that activation is still on the stack. So your painter comes in, you choose a color, activation resolves, and it checks the painter, and that's a whole deck going to the graveyard.
Yeah, and we saw the Progenitus was the last card, and that's why they die immediately on the spot here. But Callium coming out 2-1 over Elves. Some really weird games. I mean, game 2 when we joined there, I thought it was gonna be like, yeah, whatever. We're gonna have to kill some time between rounds. We have to see that whole game, and then turn 1 Blood Moon just like, all right, did you have your forest? And something that's maybe completely dodgeable if Testacular was just on the play that game.
Yeah, game one, if you're on the play that game 3, you fetch your forest, and then the Blood Moon basically, I mean, it shuts off a Gaia's Cradle or something, but really doesn't do much beyond that. And we saw Callum's hand. I don't know if that hand is keepable if you're on the draw, and maybe this is a play versus draw thing where the Blood Moons are not even in the deck on the draw. But if you're on the draw there, you can't rely on the Blood Moon, which means your hand just really has nothing going for it. Maybe you have to mulligan. On the play, though, I think Callum knows. Well, he fans open that opening 7. He's just won the game, unless that basic forest shows up quickly enough.
100%. I think we're going to take a moment real quick here and get the next round going. Probably about a 1-minute break. We'll be right back with the last round of the Heritage event before we go on to top 4. and we are back with the last round of our Heritage Tournament sponsored by Mana Traders. If you're just joining us, no supplementary cards, just Legacy as intended, just things that came through Standard. Boom, that's going to the format. No Commander cards, no Infinity, no nonsense. We're going into our last round. We're going to actually watch Newton versus Brian Koval, and so it's going to be Doomsday versus Elves. The winner of this will make it to our top 4, which is super exciting. We're going to be battling out for $300 here, just in a little bit of that. But first, Dom, how have you thought about the tournament so far? You've been excited while we wait for these decks to pop up.
It's been a lot of fun, especially seeing Jerry just revive some of his and our favorites from back in the day in his bug deck, and then seeing some of these throwbacks, some of these old school painter decks, Stephen Show, Little Blast from the past, and then we have our share of the more modern stuff like the Red Zombie decks and so on as well. So we've got a little bit of everything, and that's going to continue in our last feature match here, where you could call it a combo mirror. Depending on what day you ask, Newton calls this deck Cradle Control, Cradle Midrange. I think Elf Singular is the name currently in vogue because there are not that many elves in the deck anymore. And they're kind of working their way out. And I think this is actually where that kind of mid-rangey toolbox approach is not where you want to be. You're against Doomsday, like this fast combo deck. You would much rather kind of try and raise them go toe-to-toe with like the Glimpse of Nature stuff, which is still maybe a bit too slow. I think that matchup is still pretty rough for elves, but it at least gives you a way in there. Whereas this is, I imagine Brian is licking his chops now.
Yeah, Brian has got to be pretty excited, and we're going to see Fiend Artisan have an array of tools you can access, but can you access them quick enough, and do they matter enough versus Doomsday to actually be worth losing that speed that you get from having things like Glimpse of Nature in your deck? That's pretty exciting. One of our other people that is playing for top 8 as well, for people that are interested at home, we do have Jerry versus Caleb Dorwald. So that's going to be Sultai versus Color Control. So that's pretty exciting to have them in backup playing. Then we have Callian we saw before versus Phil Gallagher, and a little bit of a degeneracy mirror going on down there. They're all live for our top 4, which is super exciting. Let's see if we can pull up the Newton list here and see exactly kind of what he's playing. So Newton, we talked about before, does have the 4 Fiend Artisan. This is much more closer to what you see from current elves right now. You can look out in the sideboard and you see things like, okay, we have Shriek Maw, we have an 8 Mindsense, we have a Gaddock Teague, we have, is it Web Spinner? Is that the name of this card? I always forget its name. Arasta, yes.
Some funky Theros Beyond Death card that's good against Delver. Not going to come up here, I imagine. But this is actually somewhat closer to classic elves than I was giving him credit for at first. We still have the kind of Glimpse combo focus in here, but this is elves with that additional tutor plus threat in the form of Fiend Artisan, which that is Newton's baby. That has been one of his main innovations for this archetype, along with Elf Claimer, which was the initial kind of fork in the road that he chose to take the deck in.
100%. You do see things like Mass Vandal in the main deck, which comes up against some of our other players in tournament, like our mono red stock players or the painter players. Having Mass Vandal is kind of an interesting thing to have instead of, Reclamation Sage, the deck played before. A little bit cheaper, but a little bit more hoops to jump through. Pretty excited to see how this deck plays out. I think it's going to be really close. Meanwhile, we have Brian's deck, which we did see early in the tournament, back in full force here. Doomsday, really strong, powerful deck in the Legacy format, but recently, does lean on some of the more Modern Horizon-y cards. But here we don't have anything like that in that tournament. So it's much more cleaner. Things out like without Personal Tutor, you have to go a little bit deeper to figure out, okay, how am I going to find my combo? How am I going to do the thing?
Yeah, this is what some Doomsday players call Turbo Doomsday. Without the Personal Tutor aspect, you're less consistent at being a Turbo Doomsday deck. You just don't find the card Doomsday quite as quickly or quite as often, but still quickly enough for this to be a fast, consistent, and scary combo deck. And then in the sideboard, we actually, I think the nausea is there perhaps as an in-joke where this was a legacy combo deck back in the day where they all had these ridiculous names and nausea was one of them. Don't know if it is a nod to that or if it is actually a thing you want to kill one toughness creatures, in which, in the elves matchup, those are actually in ample supply.
Yeah, it's be curious to see kind of how that sideboarding goes. That could be something we totally see. Maybe it just grows, Newton's Fiend Artisans, and it's all part of Newton's brain plan to just completely dodge all the nauseas, So it's gonna be really interesting to see how that all goes here. And we saw earlier how early pressure can sometimes make this Doomsday deck stumble. It's gonna be interesting to see and Newton present that clock. And we're going to hop right down here. And it looks like Newton is on the play, which I think is super important in this matchup. We see a lot in Magic where being on the play matters a lot. And with a Green Sun Zenith Dryad Arbor deck, plus having get really on the board, I can only imagine it's amplified here.
Yeah, and Newton has a fairly explosive hand here. We have the Heritage. We only need a few more pieces to kind of kick that into overdrive. And then Brian's hand, we have the fast mana, we have a Brainstorm, but we don't have Doomsday. We don't have any actual hands, crucially. So we could get Brainstorm locked, and there's a good chance that we just don't actually do anything in the game. So I'm keen to see if Brian keeps this or if he goes in search of 6. And sure enough, he sends that one back.
Yeah, makes sense. Looks like this might be a 6 from Newton as well. Just from how it looks like with mulliganing here. Yeah, it looks like it was. Okay. Looks like Newton did take them all. Cool. Makes sense. So maybe it actually looks like Brian on the play. Then never mind. The Magic Online Union interface. I was the one person in the world who knew how it worked, and it betrayed me still. So crazy. How does this happen, Don?
You were deep in the lore, and yeah, not deep enough. So both of these hands, I like the Jurassics are interesting in this context, where you think about an elf combo deck, a lot of your relevant cards are creatures. It seems like it wouldn't be that great, but a lot of the cards that let you be that explosive, whether it's Glimpse or Green Sun Zenith potentially, if you draw a copy, are non-creature spells. So you're not going to hit that often, and Natural Order, another big one too. You won't hit that often. When you do it, it might be something very important though.
Yeah, it did look like I was bamboozled again by the Magic Online interface. It tricked me, doubted myself, gaslighting. But duress here, if it was on the play here for Brian, would have been huge. Took out the Green Sun Zenith, would have slowed down Newton a whole bunch. Here, unfortunately, he knows okay, this is what I have to beat. This is what the rules of engagement are going to be today. And Gaia's Cradle is a big draw off the top for Newton. This is one of the most broken cards in the Elves list.
Yeah, so correcting the sequencing there, starting with Elvish Visionary. Following up, I assume with the Fiend Artisan, not too much better than here. And yeah, that means we're looking at a turn 3 kill. Like next turn, Newton has this locked up unless Brian can pull a rabbit out of his hat.
Yeah, and Swamp does not seem to be the case. We do have a Street Wraith, so maybe there's something we can go with that. But for the most part, it's looking like we're going fast. Much like Ricky Bobby said. And Glimpse.
Okay, so I think this is Glimpse as a test spell to try and draw out a Forcible that might be in Brian's hand, because from this position, Newton has a lot of resources to work with. Glimpse potentially is quite scary. Brian doesn't fight, so I wonder if Newton thinks the coast might be clear. I think he's going for it regardless, but yeah, going to put Brian to the test, and if he doesn't have anything, he's dead.
Yeah, kind of a free roll just to cast a Glimpse there, so might as well see, if Brian freaks out or whatever and casts Force, then we get there. And this should be lethal. Once again, Crater Hoof Square, so that's 16 and plus power, and then we're going to be attacking everybody. Unless there's, I guess Street Wraith might be part of the whole trick.
So I guess this is Limdol's Vault to try and find a Force, put that on top, cycle the Street Wraith with draw, and then pitch the other Limdol's Vault. So Brian would technically live, but would be left with nothing, and would need whatever was below the Forcible in that stack to bail him out, probably on the next turn.
Yeah, and I know what Linval does. You know what Linval does. But for everyone at home, look at the top 5 cards of your library. As many times as you choose, you may pay 1 life. Put those cards in the bottom of your library in order, and then look at the top 5. Blah blah blah. So you basically get a bunch of spend some life, look at the top 5, move through everything there. And kind of a weird, unique card that doesn't see much play in Legacy because of other things like Personal Tutor, for example. So having to kind of go a little bit deeper here in the Heritage format to make that work. And it looks like we did find Street Wraith into it.
Yeah, the way the math works out is you can see enough stacks of 5 cards that you can basically always find 1 copy of any specific card. The issue then is, you're a Doomsday deck. There's always some pressure on the board. Do you actually have enough life to work with when the turn comes back to you? And the thing here is, even if Brian has the card Doomsday on top, there's no card draw left, right? So we'd have to pass a turn and just die on the spot to this motley crew of 1/1s and Fiend Artisans.
Yeah, we might need Thassa's Oracle as a blocker in this game. You might just need a little 1/3 action. Otherwise, we do see to have lethal in the next turn. Now, Newton can obviously attack. Attacking is very strong and just, put Brian down to 5 and move on with the day, but can also, activate Fiend Artisan. There's some tutor card in the deck that we really want access to right now. So a lot of different plays available here. And we have this Besieger too, which maybe messes up any sort of Doomsday stacking.
Yeah, so now the hope is, can we draw Doomsday next, and then Doomsday and cycle the Edge of Autumn into, I suppose, a Brainstorm, something like that, to get the chain going here and win all on the same turn? Because I think that's how we're going to have to do it now.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's any other way unless that exact sort of interaction happens. Besiegeing now, it seems. Or maybe it's Fiend Artisan for some main deck hate card or anything. No, Questing Beast we saw like in round 1. We saw a Maverick player have Questing Beast, which would be really good here. You just go and search it up. But it looks like we might just be attacking. Tutoring is cool. Attacking is cooler.
Attacking is cool. Also, there's no hate card you can really get, especially in this main deck. And then I think the cherry on top is the Besieger is, even if Brian has a Doomsday, well, now the Besieger can threaten to mess up the order of the stack and actually interfere with everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. Besieger is a Maze Search, so you could leave it there. But like, if Brian, has a certain amount of mana or needs certain things to go, it might just like totally cut him off of having the exact thing. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens here. Does look like we just have a bunch of lands in hand and our Edge of Autumn. So let's see what we can hit.
You can also do stuff like, depending on if he has to expose a Lion's Eye Diamond in advance, say do that. But yeah, for the most part, you're just attacking, presenting a clock, and that was actually good enough in this game. So I think Newton will be very happy to kind of get away with that one, and now gets to bring in, the full 4 copies of Thoughtseize, the Mind Break Trap, the Aven Mind Sensor, like Fiend Artisan target in this matchup.
Yeah, those cards are going to matter a whole bunch. Even my sense are just making Doomsday kind of a laughable card. And it's going to be really hard for him to kind of get more efficient than kind of these things he already has coming in, and just kind of gets to do that sort of game plan, which we saw is so clean, right? Just like put some creatures on the board, pressure you. I now have these extra lock pieces, so my Green Sun Zeniths and Natural Orders, if I decide to leave those in, are still really, really strong. And I just kind of have all that available to us. Meanwhile, the onus is really on Brian here to have some powerful cards in his sideboard. Let's see if we can pull that up here, because it doesn't look like it's going to be too much craziness happening on the Elf player. As for them, we have 3 Mystical Dispute, 2 Brazen Borrower, 2 Engineered Explosive, 2 Leyline of Void, 2 Shieldred, Chain of Vapor, Duress, Echoing Truth, Nausea. Nausea definitely pretty appealing, right? Like getting to kill everything else, but what else is kind of jumping out to you, Dom?
Yeah, this might actually be the elusive. But beyond that, I think the Engineered Explosives can potentially buy you a lot of time against a board full of 1-drop elves. This is also actually where the Fiend Artisan is kind of nice, because it's a 2-drop, so kind of dodges that with the scaling. And then if your board gets swept by explosives, well, now you have this big thing that can start attacking and applying pressure. If it's not, tutoring up a hate card like Aven Mind Sensor as well. So I think the explosives probably do come in. Not the be-all and end-all, but just a nice defensive tool to buy some time, maybe.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm noticing about this version of Doomsday is kind of why we see players like Samantha Murphy move to like a more tempo-y Murktide heavy in current legacy. Not spend too much time on the current legacy, but like, having a backup plan and having creatures so you don't just get run over, and you can play different game plans, makes it so you're not so pigeonholed and not so binary in your matchups, right? Where now, like, when we play this deck, we have one plan, and that's to go fast. We have the Shieldred in the sideboard, which kind of changes things a little bit. But for the most part, we're kind of just doing our thing and hoping it's good enough. And sometimes creatures are just better than our thing.
Yeah, you have Turbo Doomsday, and then you have Tempo Doomsday, the approach that you described. And I think the main incentive there is that you kind of need any realistic plan against Delver. Because if you try and be a Doomsday combo deck, some people do that, and then they'll take their 40% and punch that one in. But you want to try and radically restructure your deck in order to have a hope against Delver. And to do that, you kind of need to move some stuff into the main deck and to have a shot there in game 1. And if you think that, hey, my Doomsday is still an A plan, but it's not the plan, if that plan is still good enough against the vast majority of the field, which I think is a good case that it is, then I can afford to have some of these wonky pieces that aren't really combo pieces in my deck, because when I transform against Delver, I actually have a shot there the way I didn't before.
100%. And we're seeing here the mulligans start to happen. Looks like Brian's considering, like, okay, I've got Doomsday, I've got some lands. This is enough. Probably not gonna mulligan. Meanwhile, from Newton's side, yeah, he just had like a bunch of creatures and once upon a time, and that's kind of the classic once time problem of like makes mulliganing really hard. Like, ooh, like my hand's kind of good, but how great could it be? How do I want to walk that line? But we're seeing both players kind of just go down here and try and find more faster hands.
And what we see from Brian, I don't think we know yet if he has kept the hand. Well, Magic Online experts to let us know that, but this is a classic example of Brainstorm fixes a lot of problems, or at least promises to. Unclear if it always does, but you can keep, if this is a dodgy 6-card hand, the Brainstorm can really bail you out in a way that really no other card selection spell outside of, Vintage can.
Yeah, and we see Newton here mulliganing all the way down to 5. Didn't decide to keep the kind of risky glimpse with one creature. Down to 4 even, it looks like.
Okay.
Down to 3 here. Seems to be the case then. And we have Snuff Out, which I see what we're saying. Sorry. Our Honorog and our ears seconds ahead of us and knew that we were going down to 4 there. So, but honestly, of a 4-card hand, we have, Cradle and Glimpse, and we can search up a Dryad Arbor turn 1, and then we have 3 mana. So maybe we can actually, do something here.
We can get something cooking. Yeah, and Heritage Druid is going to help that too. I was pretty surprised to see those Snuff Outs in the deck. You can, if there's some Thassa's Oracle line that actually relies on the devotion from Oracle itself, then maybe you can steal a game that way, but that seems like kind of a remote prospect to me. And even if Brian decides to try and zig while you zag with the Shieldreds, well, Snuff Out only cares about non-black creatures. So I'm not sure exactly what that card is being earmarked for, unless I'm missing something obvious.
Yeah, there must be some plan Newton has. Newton's obviously just basically plays elves all the time. That's the whole shtick. By the way, turn to Doomsday. Hello, we're finally seeing Brian do it, and what a perfect time to do it too. Don't give Newton time to actually dig out this. Like he was looking like he was going to at this Moldifor. But yeah, I wonder if the Snuff Out is maybe just like it's been playing Magic for a little bit. Against Doomsday, I normally bring this in to clear a Murktide type card or something like that, and this kind of autopiloted brought in, and maybe we have to reevaluate for game 3 here.
Yeah, and this threatens an immediate kill because we have the edge of. We can put a Lotus Petal on top. Lotus Petal enables Brainstorm, and then we're kind of good to go from there. LED, Street Wraith, and so on. And crucially, this is a spot where in current Legacy, you're thinking, well, my opponent's tapped out and doesn't have anything. But what if they have Endurance? And that would inform how you have to build your pile. One of frankly, the biggest changes from Legacy to Heritage is no Endurance. And that's a really relevant thing in the Doomsday matchup.
Yeah, Endurance, I think when it was previewed, a lot of players, were like, oh, yeah, like this one's probably kind of strong, but in Legacy, it's where it's going to really shine. And we've seen it do way more in Modern than I think a lot of people originally expected. But like you mentioned here, that does change up so much where we might see Brian take for, another minute or two, just being like, okay, yeah, I can beat it. We'll do it like this instead, and kind of do that whole rigmarole, especially on a Moldifor, right? Like maybe Newton tried to mold it towards a hate card or whatever. But now that isn't something to really work about.
The big wild card, I think, is that one copy Sideboard, which so far we've cast 2 spells this turn, the Ritual and the Doomsday. And this is why the card is a little unreliable, is that you can't hit the namesake time, but you can maybe tag something in the chain if Brian does try to kill this turn. So you cycle the Edge of Autumn, you hit the Lotus Petal, that gets trapped, and you have to pass the turn. So now Brian will be thinking, okay, well, can I put both Oracles in my pile so that if something happens to the first one, I can still kill naturally? Or if I have to work towards a slower kill, I have the ways to do that.
100%. Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see exactly what Brian comes here. As we're going to game 3, because for the most part, maybe something wild happens here with Newton, but including Resolve Doomsday, and like Dom mentioned, we have the Edge of Autumn, so we can get the Lotus Petal and the Brainstorm into killing actually this turn. Do you think there's anything Newton is going to have to like maybe keep different types of hands or anything? Or was it just this kind of like, sometimes I'm going to have you on turn 2 is some sort of acceptance you have to have when playing against the Doomsday deck?
Well, we saw none of his hands really had that much going for them, right? So this was almost a forced Moldifor. And then maybe this isn't the most scientific way to think about things, but I know personally, when I'm in that spot, I'm thinking, okay, I'm glad they had the turn 2 kill against me when my hand was that bad, because at least I have another shot at it in game 3, where I imagine Newton will be placing a pretty heavy priority on either a fast kill, if you can threaten a turn 3 win on the play, that often will be good enough, or I want that Thoughtseize, I want that maybe naturally drawn Aven Mind Sense or the Mindbreak Trap.
100%. And we're seeing here, looks like kind of like what we talked about is happening. This is a double oracle. Sure. So you have 2 oracles in case there is some mind break trap shenanigans. Doomsday. Hey, this is like, you see that new secret lair Doomsday? The manga? You in? How do you like that one?
Junji Ito, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know the backstory there, so I just go on what I see on the card. Card looks pretty sweet.
It
So
looks great.
yeah, hopefully the actual foiling or card production process will do justice to that.
Yeah, I don't buy many secret layers, but that one is Ito is such a great artist. It's hard to go. Anyways, that's the Doomsday.
All right, so Brian
Glimpse?
chose a pile which forced him to pass a turn. So now there is a theoretical chance that we can go off on this turn. It's going to be pretty remote, and I think actually drawing the glimpse there means it's not possible anymore. But
Yeah, I think we had to hit Nettle Sentinel instead of Glimpse there, and then we had a world where we just kind of run her into an Elvish Visionary and things go off. But it looks like for the most part is going to be over here. Not casting many things, so nothing can really go through wrong here. Brian, once again, we talked about this at the control, and it's so much easier when we talk about the control decks, right? Where it's like, hey, let's make sure I'm not losing any value. I'm not, bleeding in equity points. With combo decks, people get so frustrated, right? And they're like, hey, stop slowing me, blah, 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 blah. But really, it's the same exact thing here for Brian. It's like, I want to make sure I'm not losing to something silly. I've got the game wrapped up. Let's make sure I'm doing things right.
And with Doomsday in particular, you can often find a pile that wins. Like that often is the easy part. The hard part is, how do I turn my 95% chance to win into a 100% chance? And often what really separates the wheat from the chaff in terms of experienced Doomsday players versus novice Doomsday players.
100%. So we're going to go back into the sideboard real quick here. It looks like, Brian probably didn't bring in Sheldred. I'm going to guess from everything we saw. I didn't look at the whole deck, and maybe I should have. That's on me. But regardless, it looks like he kind of kept lean, mean fighting machine. Probably just like the, engineered explosives and the nausea, just to make sure it doesn't get completely run over here. I'm really curious. I'm looking back over the deck list. I'm trying to figure out what Snuff Out's for. Do you have any ideas how we're seeing it? It's Brazen Borrower. It fixed all the bad matchups, so we're snuffing it out.
So it has flying. Flying is a broken mechanic. Endurance isn't in this format, so gotta answer that one somehow. I could see something like the Chain of Vapor from Brian's side. If you need to deal with that Mind Sensor or something, that does actually let you do that. You don't want to be completely cold to that card.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense there. That's a pretty powerful one. Probably not too much. Let's go back over to Newton's deck and see if we can see. Maybe there's something going on here. So what kind of cards do you think Newton's cutting in order to bring in stuff like Snuff Out? Maybe he's going lower on like Crop Rotate Caracas stuff and just has some extra room and is like, well, there's some stuff where this maybe comes up.
Yeah, stuff like Bajuka Bog, no graveyard shenanigans going on really. There's some obscure Doomsday piles, but for the most part, this is a come into play tapped Blackstore. So maybe I guess I cast Thoughtseize, but I think that one can probably lead the deck. And then beyond that, you have some of these easy cards, Mars Vandal, no appealing targets there. And then you get into the tough questions where are you like shaving an elf here or whatever there, or are you hacking away at stuff like Natural Order, where this is a card which lets you win from a very small base of resources. So if you multiply to find your Thoughtseize and you Thoughtseize, or you can work towards the turn 3 Natural Order. On the other hand, it is susceptible to something like Forcible, does actually require some of that initial setup, versus a card like Glimpse, where you kind of saw that game, right? Like this is your theoretical out to win, but also has some conditionality of its own, right? So there's the Stuff Out. I don't know. I'm going to be keen to hear from Newton what's going on here. Like I must be missing something, surely. Chat,
I'm gonna sniff this one out. Yeah. Twitch chat, you're always right. Please tell us the answer.
Twitch chat is on the case, as always.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, this is a really good Mold-a-Six with the Snuff Out. Get a bonus Snuff Out. So you just have turn Green Sun Zenith into, some stuff. Maybe you wait a turn depending on kind of what you draw. You might have just a little bit of time. You can actually kind of juice out the Glimpse, make sure it's going to be enough since you're a little light on material here. But we're about to see exactly what's Meanwhile, from Brian's side, we see some, pretty nice permission with Daze, and we have Dark Ritual to accelerate out Doomsday if we draw it, and we have EE. So looks like Brian's going to be taking a much more slow controlling approach in this round and kind of interact a little bit. And as soon as I draw Doomsday, Dark Ritual, Doomsday out, go.
Yeah, and this is the difference between the Turbo Doomsday deck and the Tempo Doomsday deck, where the Tempo deck, this makes sense as this like opening gambit because you can find some other threat and you can work towards some conclusion in the game. With this version of Doomsday, you either resolve Doomsday or you don't, and there's really there's no in between. So Brian is going to need to find a Doomsday, doesn't have one yet, and also doesn't have a card like Brainstorm that gives him a lot more looks at it.
100%. And, it looks like we're going to see here, Brian hasn't tried to daze any of these sort of cards, doesn't really care. Is just going to let his EE clean up these threats. And, the Wirewood Symbiote here is going to get us a redraw, but we're not going to get anywhere further. It looks like Wirewood Symbiote might actually just eat the removal spell after seeing the land already played, no Cradle or anything. Just kind of cut off here.
Yeah, that's a nice daze from Brian, who also does have this surprise like Dark Ritual into Crack Engineered Explosion.
Yeah, if need be, that is something. Yeah, you do have,
Okay,
yeah,
the Ponder.
Ponder's a good start. It is funny to go.
Well, again, we have no way of knowing this, but if he were to keep on top, that would be a very bad sign for our Elves players. I would argue.
Yeah, you really hoping for that shuffle. It looks like we might just have a Thoughtseize. What if Brian takes the Snuff out? If Brian takes the Snuff out, you and I have so much egg on our face, it's crazy.
Yeah, I as far as I know, Brian is recording his matches for YouTube and for kind of commentary later. I want to see this live reaction to the Snuff out here.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Regardless, so now, with Thoughtseize, we removed all the threats here. We have EE to cover the future ones, but Brian is just kind of like, okay, if we didn't keep anything else good on Ponder, maybe we were clearing the way with the Thoughtseize to make sure nothing, scary like even Mind Sensor was going to come down, etc., or anything along those lines. But now we're going to have to play out into this and hope to draw well from Brian. This is interesting. Do you put the Reclaimer to pop the EE, or do you just kind of take your 2x2 like nowhere on the arc?
Huh.
Where's the Noah? Is that whole analogy just throwing you off? It's hard to process Magic when your opponent says stuff like that,
Hey, we have the Bible story in England,
Oh, y'all have it over there? That's crazy. Wow, I didn't know that. That's wild.
Oh, okay. Hear me out. What if we just hardcast Street Wraith? And just get jiggy with it. Just crack
some cracking
your turn. There is a bayou. And you know what? You know what Street Wraith has protection from? Snuff out.
Mm-hmm. Every part of the Buffalo, Dom. Every part of the Duffalo. And we have double Dryad Arbor here. 2x2, baby.
Now we're seeing, though, why this Fiend Artisan innovation looks so good, because this is a chunky, don't know the exact power tough, but also, if it gets to untap, then that thing can dig up an Aven Mind Sensor and probably seal the deal on this game.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to need to find Doomsday this turn. We do have Duress for the Snuff out, so all the best like plans will fall apart. But, I think it might be telling that Brian isn't casting Duress into the Snuff out, but he knows there. He's like, I'll just pass. Don't worry about it. I don't need my mana. It's fine. And Natural Order, that's game.
Oh, yeah.
I guess if you're Newton, maybe you're worried about like Force or something, but if you still have the Hoof in your deck.
Yeah, I think it might actually be safer to just search up the Mind set, because you don't get Force or anything, and against a card like Chain of Vapor, I think it works out about the same in the end. I guess you put him on 1, so either way, you have logged up. So what we thought was a bad matchup for the Elves deck, take that one down, despite the Snuff out, or maybe because of the Snuff out, and cementing a spot in the top 4.
Yeah, life finds a way. Elves, there's can only be such a fail rate on creatures, right? Like, this is the thing with these spells. They're so strong, they're so powerful, but they do have a fail rate. If you just put bodies in play, what we've learned in Time and Magic is that's actually good enough to kind of go the distance. So the fail rate on these creatures is so low, especially when you have a card like Fiend Artisan, which just outscales the removal. It's like, okay, well, you're killing all my stuff, that's fine. This is really big. You've kind of undone all the work you've done, along with having that tutor package. So great innovations from Newton. Great to see it here in action.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about these creature combo decks across all formats. Stuff like Yorkmoth and Current Garden. It's really just been a time honored truth, was that sometimes your plan A is offline and your plan B is to attack for
Hmm.
versus this build of Doomsday, where none of that is really on the table at all.
Yeah. And so I think we have almost everyone in. I believe we have just our backup feature match. Here's our last one, and these players I believe are playing for top 8. The winner of this should make it. Here it is. Caleb Dord versus Jerry Thompson, and it looks like we're in game 3 here with Sylvan Library in play. Normally a really good thing to have against a control deck. Unfortunately, Caleb does have Narset in play. Oh, it
Yeah.
looks like maybe it's a question mark situation.
Oh, how do you mean?
Well, because Honorog changed it from being game 3 over here in the overlay to being question mark question mark. So it might be game 2.
Okay. No surprise either way that Sultai control versus full color control is actually the last match going. I think the safe money would have been on that this whole time. Going for Assassin's Trophy on Narset to kind of unlock the Sylvan Library, but Otherworldly Light in response on the Sylvan Library going to make that a moot point either way. And March is an interesting choice because these are the lengths we have to go to when we can't lean on Prismatic Ending anymore. That is one of the big absences that we have in Heritage without all of these MH2 cards.
100%. And we are totally working on fixing the hands right now. We're hopping in mid-match. Bear with us for a second here. But yeah, like you were mentioning, March Ruler White is a really strong card, but it gets outclassed by some other things that released, in Modern Horizons. So it never got its true time in Legacy, where I think if printed 3 or 4 years ago, would have been a completely game-changing card.
Absolutely. And Assassin's Trophy essentially is just Vindicate in this matchup where Caleb has no basic lands in the entire deck. So that's something which I'm sure the Blood Moon gamers in the top 4 are going to enjoy. In this matchup, it essentially means that Assassin's Trophy has no real drawback.
100%. And we see Jerry here casting him Torok, and then Caleb firing off a brainstorm to hide the good cards so we can draw them back. That was a good one to hide.
Oh god,
that was a good one.
Yeah, we want that trophy back. Can we?
Yeah, can we get a rebate? What can I do? And it looks like Jerry actually has used both trophies from kind of glancing at the graveyard. There's 2 black-green cards already used, so Jerry might be behind the 8 ball on this Jace the Mind Sculptor here.
Yeah, there's no Pyroblast or anything in Jerry's deck. No splash or anything like that. So that Jace is gonna stick. And turns out controlling Jace, for a few turns and getting to brainstorm every turn, even though the card isn't what it once was, they're still going to win you most of those games.
100%, yeah. Especially with the mana boost from Carpet of Flowers. Jerry's giving Caleb here an extra 3 mana every turn. That makes it so much easier just to actually deploy all the resources, which is sometimes the choke point in these situations. We do see a Nihil Spellbomb come down for Jerry here, kind of signature card. Also really good against, Uro and things like that. Even though not hitting Uro here, just removing those 13 cards removes that sort of problem, lets Jerry have a chance to find something. It looks like Brary's going to go into Brainstorm to try and find, hopefully, probably a Tarmogoyf for something along those lines in order to answer Uro. I guess you could play your own Uro. Oh, sorry, to answer the Jace, but you could draw an Uro and get that going.
Yeah, I'm squinting at the battlefield here, trying to. Caleb doesn't have that much left over other than the Jace. So yeah, if you can get to the point where you can play a Tarmogoyf every turn, force a Jace to either bounce a Tarmogoyf or kind of gamble in search of an answer for it, then yeah, maybe you can work your way back in that way.
Yeah, it does look like we have the hand reverse of the second. So Jerry does not have Expressive Iteration in his deck, but Caleb does. So it looks like that's kind of where that's going. But Jerry has the Narset from his sideboard that he found, which turns off the Jace Brainstorm. Obviously, Expressive can play through that, but we can still get some, face sealing action going on. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Caleb tries to battle through this. He draws a second Expressive Iteration.
Yeah, if you wonder why Jace fell out of favor in Legacy, Narset is a big reason why. And it's weird to think that this uncommon blue Planeswalker that's in the set with all of these other Planeswalkers, like, this is somehow the most impactful one for Legacy, and it ended the career preemptively of one of these absolute titans of the format.
Yeah, 100%. And we see Expressive Iteration doing what it does, just generate a huge amount of card advantage and battling through the Narset. And it looks like we found the Pyroblast, so Jace is back online. And, Expressive Iteration is one of the cards that we kind of joked about at the beginning of the broadcast, being a thing that you would think would not be allowed in this sort of tournament. It's so strong. It's so over the line. It feels like in a lot of ways in these sort of grindy fair games, and it shows just how good it is in that spot.
Yeah, which is why, if depending on who you ask, Iteration, it gets named a lot as one of the cards which, if you're going to end Delver's throttling of normal legacy at some point, maybe Iteration has to go, because that is a card which, Delver has good interaction, good card draw, good threats as well, no matter how many of them you ban, but it's never really had that many good ways to reload, and whenever it does, often that's a thing that gets taken down. So Lurrus, for example, your Dreadhorde Arcanist, these cards which can actually get you card advantage in the long term, that fixes the one hole in the Delver strategy and makes it just the best deck on all of these different axes.
100%. Yeah, and also, Dom, more excitingly, we have Narset going, sure, Jerry can't draw cards anymore. We're really close to hard casting that Shirk type thing. We have 2 Carpet of Flowers. We're on the cusp. We're right there.
And hey, if couldn't deal with the
And yeah, it looks like Jerry's going to concede. Caleb Dord wins the match 2-0 over Jerry Thompson. Exciting couple turns there. It would have been really cool to see that whole thing go down. But kind of a classic, like, hey, Jerry's trying to be a little bit slower than these other fair mid-rangey decks. But then, Caleb's like, no, but I've got the real card advantage. All 4 colors, Expressive Iteration, Mystic Sanctuary, that sort of combo is something that can push you way over the top of all these other decks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is kind of the best of all of the last few years across the color pie that we have access to. So that it used to be these decks were effectively banned, splashing Pyroblast just for the mirrors, for the Delver decks, and so on. And now Iteration means you have a reason to commit to red a bit more fully. And then Minsk and Boo is a name you will not be hearing in this Heritage tournament. Now this is like full on 4-color, and we are definitively a red deck now in current Legacy.
100%. I think we have one match still going. I think we have Mapson versus Francisco. I don't know if we're gonna be able to get that coverage. We're looking. Fran has actually won 2-0, so I'm just hearing. So it looks like I believe that's everything. We're gonna take a quick break here before our top 4. We're gonna go over all of that. Thank you once again for sticking with us. We'll be back in about 2 minutes, let's say.
Live from Electric Zoo 2019 on Diplo's Revolution. This is Eric Prydz.
Time marches on, never ending. Time keeps its own time. Here we stand at the beginning, and in those passing us by, and I can't dream for us all. I hope I'm in a better state when here and now crumbles and falls, and you
everyone, and we are back for top 4 of our Heritage event today. It's brought to you by Mana Traders. Mana Traders put up $500 on the line that our players are playing for right now. Along with some donations from people in the community. We had Mr. Lee, who was playing on the tournament today, donate $20 for last place. So Osmandius won $20. Congratulations on going 0-4 and having the worst breakers. You got $20 coming your way there. And we had, Yeoman5 in the community donating an additional $100 to the prize pool. So we have that going as well. So a lot of money, kind of online here for this fun event. But Dom, before we start talking about who's in top 4 and everything there, what do you think so far of the event? What do you think of the format? Is this something you're really excited to play with, maybe in your Discord or whatever going forward?
Yeah, it's been a fun snapshot of Legacy past with also some of the stuff which some people enjoy, maybe some people don't about Legacy. Our top 4 bracket, I think, encapsulates that perfectly. Where on the one side, we have a mono red Stompy mirror, which you will be glad to hear we will not be focusing on as our primary feature. And then the other side, we have Elves versus Sneak and Show. So Elves deck still certainly putting its weight in current Legacy, and Newton, who will be playing it in our top 4, is at the forefront of that against JPA on Sneak and Show. And that pairing, JPA and Sneak and Show, no surprise to anyone, he may be the one person who can still put up results with that deck. And that is a deck which, you go back to 2017, 2012, this was a defining deck in Legacy, like the go-to combo deck that has fallen by the wayside since then. So maybe with some of this stuff taken out, a deck like that can flourish again. We'll see. Would not surprise me at all to see JPA take this whole thing down, especially because I think Elves is a decent matchup, and if he gets through that, then I think Mono Red Stompy is a very good matchup. So yeah, would not surprise me at all to see that happen.
Yeah, I think Newton's going to be the hero for our 2 mono red Prism players. They're probably not super happy to see Elves on the other side of the table anyways, but compare that to the Sneak and Show matchup. They're like, well, at least I have a chance against Elves. Their mana sucks. I can maybe do a turn 1 Blood Moon. I can kind of, hopefully lock them out with Chalice of the Void or something like that. Especially if you're a number 1 seed XJ Cloud, kind of one of the forefront people in Legacy and pushing the metagame forward, and especially for this mono red Prism deck, is our number 1 seed, so is on the play throughout the entire rest of the tournament if they win this next round. So a huge thing for them. They're really cheering for Newton and cheer for Newton. Hope I get a turn 1 Chalice. Hope we can do the whole thing there. But yeah, it was, you just saw Newton last round. He won the win in and is now going to be in our top 4. And we had a lot of exciting games happen there. It's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens here in the top 4. We're just about to go to the deck list and look at all over that. But I got to say, the Fiend Artisan stuff has just been impressive, despite not being as powerful as it is in current Legacy. It just keyword big is something I really value, and I think keyword big plus consistent has been a real big tell for this deck in the format, and been really awesome to see.
Yeah, I almost wonder now what other decks in other formats could explore with Artisan, because it seems like that hidden gem, which is now being rediscovered and coming to the forefront. So you think about a deck like Yawgmoth in Modern, right? That's already pretty optimized and pretty figured out. But what if this is a new direction you could take it, even if it's just a one-off Fiend Artisan here and there? And you start to look at other places where this card could show up. I know that one route that people are going down current Legacy is just, what if we just don't bother with any of this elf nonsense? What if we just build a mid-rangey creature toolbox deck headlined by Fiend Artisan? And so I know Jarvis U has been streaming that a bit, and lots of people have been chipping in ideas, and that's a really fun process to watch develop, because you have this new archetype effectively, and how often do you get to see that in Legacy? And it's one which, in theory, was just under our notice this whole time, and anyone could have done this a year or 2 ago.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things in Magic is when we have these cards that have been around for a while and they eventually get kind of figured out. And it's not because they printed some new card and it's like, oh yeah, well, we all knew Fiend Artisan was gonna be good. We just had to wait for that tutor target. That's what people said. But people are just like, no, I got in there and I kind of figured out the cards we already have and things shift enough in the metagame that this can be a deck I can play. And here is Newton's version of Heritage Elves with Fiend Artisan. We saw this in the last round here. It's gonna be pretty interesting. When it comes to this matchup, probably the biggest thing that's going to change is speed matters even more so than against Doomsday, since a turn 2 show and tell is so backbreaking that it's going to happen there. But maybe we have enough disruption with things like Thoughtseize that we can beat this sort of matchup.
I will say, I think even if Elves in general lines up poorly against Sneak and Show, I think this list actually does have a lot going. The Elvish Reclaimer package, see that main deck Caracas, that's going to be a big deal. That's going to shut off a lot of the kind of a naked show and tell into Emrakul lines, or even if you can get Grizzlebrand in, then there will be times where, okay, you know that's getting bounced back, it won't get to attack, and you just don't have the life total left over to draw 7 cards and try and go again. So access to Caracas consistently is a big deal. And then in the sideboard, 4 Thoughtseize, that's big. The Gaddock Tea, shutting off sneak attack, and you can search for that one with your Zenith, with your Fiend Artisan. That's really nice as well. And then even stuff like, I don't know, Shriekmore is going to be in the mix, just like show and tell off, that to kill Emrakul or what have you. But lots of options available. And then you see this list for JPA, which I guess is coming prepared for the Elves matchup in its own right. We have 2 copies of Gratuitous Cage, excellent card there against Zenith and Fiend Artisan, 3 Pyroclasm, to just sweep up an entire board of whatever, and Makers of the Moon, right? We mentioned how fragile the Elves mana base is, and especially when that mana contains to shut off now, maybe we'll lean on that as well. So both decks bringing these socks full of pennies to the table, and we'll see who wins this fight there.
Yeah, it's gonna be super interesting to see kind of what happens. I kind of put my money on the show and tell deck. Where are you at on things? If you were a betting man,
I think with JPA on the play, which I believe is the case here, I'm gonna lean in that direction. But I think Elves has more fight than it did when this matchup again was being played in 2014, 2015.
100% agree there. Let's get down to the area though and see exactly what's happening here. JPA is on the play and looks like has kept a very classic kind of hand we saw before. Has the fatties, has the show and tell, just needs the 2 mana, and we have a bunch of cantrips to do that.
Yeah, if this Ponder turns up Ancient Tomb, do traces, then off to the races. And there's going to be very little that Newton can do about it. So no shuffle, keeps, draws an island. Have to think that maybe Lotus Petal, Spirit Guide or something queued up on top there. And then for Newton, he has a good hand, and a hand which I think might actually have been fast enough on the play. As it is, I don't know if he's going to get time to work with it.
Yeah, he's just unfortunately lost the dice roll there. And yeah, we have Lotus Petal, and we're going to show and tell in this Emrakul. And so this does create an interesting moment where we get to put a thing in for our side of the board, right? So we have the Cradle in our hand, we have the Glimpse, we have the Heritage Druids, we have the Zenith. If we draw the right cards, we can put a Crater Hoof and just attack through this Grizzlebrand. So,
on the other hand, though, that Grizzlebrand gives you 14 looks at a Forcible to pair with your blue cards, and Lotus Petal and yes, we're just see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. And that's why I think you see Grizzlebrand coming in over Emrakul, where there's good. If you show in Emrakul there, you don't get to untap and attack with it. Whereas this Grizzlebrand gives you that line of defense. And that's why printing of Grizzlebrand was this seminal moment in Legacy, because before that, you could show tell or sneak attack in Emrakul, other Eldrazi, and so on. Grizzlebrand was the thing that really catapulted that deck to the top tier of the format at that time. Maybe not so much these days.
100%. And also, this shows just how much difference the Elf deck has with having Allosaurus Shepherd, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if Newton went Shepherd turn 1 there. It's like, oh, well, I'm down a card on a Glimpse, but all my spells resolve, so you die? Is that cool? And we might see that, when I think that plays out here, we do have some Green Sun Zenith shenanigans that maybe we can do in order to buy a little bit of time, but it does look like a problem here. And like you mentioned before, JPA can just draw 7, try and find another force well for any of this if we think it's getting too risky. Interesting. We got the symbiote. We got now another Visionary, draw another card. Yeah, I guess you just have to hope that the Grizzlebrand doesn't draw enough stuff to actually win.
There is a world where, so if you want to sneak in the Emrakul to attack with it now, you're going to have to do that pre-combat. JPA's on 11, you only get 1 set of 7. You need some other stuff to go right. So there is a world, and maybe we're watching it play out here, where he just bricks and doesn't get to do anything. And you have this Zenith left over. You have the Fiend Artisan, actually. So I am starting to think that Newton has this.
Yeah, because from JPA, like JPA can go like, Studio Traders or whatever, and like put in a Sneak and Show and leave up Spell Pierce or whatnot and have Force. But it's maybe not enough. And I don't think we have, it's not like it's a post-board game, right? Where we have like a Pyroclasm. Like if this was game 2, we would see Pyroclasm probably from JPA. If you look at 14 cards, clear up the board, and we just kind of move on third day, right? But game 1, it's looking like a problem.
The out here, I think, is that there is that 1 copy of Omniscience. Oh. If you can dig your way towards that, you show and tell that in, you cast the Emrakul, you take the extra turn, and that's going to. And we got 7 cards here. We got Brainstorm. We got some other outs. So those odds are not so bad. But it looks like we're just scrolling frantically through this hand of cards. I think we don't have it rolled up just yet.
Yeah, this is also the classic moment of paper. You're like, just come on and kill me or whatever. And like, I'd love to. I would like nothing more. Unfortunately, I need to decide if Brainstorm or Preordain is better for finding my omniscience.
I will say it is alarming to some extent how often you brick after drawing 7 cards, drawing 14 cards with a con. And that almost has to be the case for a deck like this to be able to remain in the format.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, if it was just always did its thing, then just would not be a part of the thing. Also, it's just showing how strong current legacy is. That like this isn't good enough. Like this isn't something that you really see anymore outside of like dedicated show and tell players.
And part of that is on the front end, where just resolving the show and tell, resolving the sneak attack is harder than it's ever been. And if you can get Grizzlebrand into play, yeah, that's all going to be good enough vast majority of the time. But getting there is not so easy.
Yep. And yeah, I think it looks like JPA is deciding like, okay, what is, like Dom said, the best way to find omniscience? It's got to know that like putting in the Emrakul is not enough. And it looks like Ponder.
Yeah, Brainstorm is kind of an interesting choice here because if you miss, then you need to shuffle before you look again because you're putting 2 cards back. And shuffling probably is going to mean if you have to crack the fetch line to do it, then you're removing the land drop that could be one of these 2 mana lands, which you might need to cast show and tell in the first place. So I actually wonder if Ponder or Preordain might have been a better lead in there.
I think Jonathan just had Preordain because the 3 Ponders were drawn off the Brainstorm. It's just trips.
Yeah, so maybe Preordain was the call.
Yeah, we'll have to see here. I mean, Jonathan obviously plays this deck a bunch and knows these sort of things. And is, used to these situations with some moolah on the line thanks to the good people at Mana Traders. But let's see here. We hit a Lotus Petal. I assume that Ponder probably shuffled. But is this Lotus Petal enough to go the distance?
Well, the problem now is we need that pedal to cast a show and tell alongside our 2 mana land, but that leaves us with nothing left in order to dig for the omniscience. So we would have to brainstorm into like 2 more pedals and the omniscience, kind of claw that back and make any progress. But no, Newton has this after JPA dig through the entire deck almost. Yeah, onboard Fiend Artisan turns out beats Grizzlebrand and 21 cards.
Yeah, Fiend Artisan is greater than Grizzlebrand. That's what I just learned. What a crazy match that was. Let's see, what does Jonathan have in his sideboard to fight against Newton here? We do have 3 Pyroclasm, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Magus of the Moon, 2 Sorcerer's Spyglass, 2 Stifle, an Echoing Truth, an Omniscience, a Pyroblast, and a Red Elemental Blast. Dom, from this, what do you like bringing in?
So definitely like the Pyroclasms. I like the Grafdigger's Cages. I think I like Magus especially on the play, and then you could argue about the omniscience and so on after seeing what happened that game, knowing that Newton has stuff like rotation or Reclaimer for Caracas. The question then becomes, how do you find room for all this stuff? And I think the Spell Pierces might be the weak link there, even though there are, as I said, a lot of good non-creature spells they can hit and stuff like Thoughtseize as well. Now maybe you also want stuff that can counter like a Zenith for a Adult Teague, let's say, to free up your sneak attack. Beyond that, maybe you shave at some of the fast mana. Unclear exactly how you find room for all that.
100%. Meanwhile, over here in L's for Nugent, who's up a game, we have 4 Thoughtseize, 2 Leyline of the Void, 2 Snuff Out, 2 Shriek Maw, a Mindbreak Track, an Avid Mind Sensor, a Progenitus, a Rat of the Endless Web, and Gadok Teague. What do you like here?
Yeah, definitely like the Thoughtseizes, like the Gadok Teague. And beyond that, it's all kind of up in the air. I think I would probably keep it to just those 5, and then cut the Mars Vandal, shave away at a few other things here and there, and be pretty happy, honestly, to present that deck.
100%. Well, let's go on down here for game number 2. It looks like JPA has turn 1 Grizzlebrand again, and I have to assume it's going to work this time. If it doesn't work this time, it's truly astonishing.
I was about to say that it's hard to throw it up better than that first game for JPA. This hand is better. This is turn 1 Grizzlebrand. There are a few cards in all of Legacy that are better than that.
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to fail this time, but I'm not counting anything out after that.
Yeah, I mean, there is some fairway, and Newton might have something. I don't know. He just got that land in play. So, who's to say what's better, Mr. Rainforest, Grizzlebrand, One of those sees a lot of modern play. It's hard to know. Anyways, we do see the Dryad Arbor fetched up here. And yeah, you're going to just need to have that fair rate happen. So we're probably just going to see Newton here kind of deploy his hand as best he can and hope to kind of, through what's going on. I almost wonder if Newton had to wait and hopes to glimpse off and just not play a creature. I don't know. Those things.
There is a world where you get to natural order on this next turn or something. That is not the world we live in.
Mhm.
The hand there, but there we are.
Yeah, we do see a Pyroclasm here for Jonathan. That's going to clean up the board and probably put Newton in a spot where we just can't get out of it.
Yeah, if he draws exactly Caracas, the game will continue, I guess, for the short term, but it's not a one he can win anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe draw crop rotation as well. That'd be the only other thing, but as of right now, looks like we're going to play this Gaddock League, and if you're going to draw Caracas, this is one of the cards you need. Johnson is probably going to respond and draw 14 cards. Finds the force in the top 7. No real need to go further if you don't want to. Looks like we may be looking for a little bit more. Just make sure we're doing everything. And we found the Pyroclasm, so maybe we just let it resolve.
Yeah, the nice thing about a player drawing 21 cards is that you get a sense of how they.
That's true. Yeah. yeah. JPA here is I didn't find force. Dang, your Gaddock resolves. That is so unlucky. Attack. And so we'll have to see here what happens. But Newton still has game 3. It's going to be on the play. Did break serve here, which was super important. And unless Newton brought in some plummets, kind of snuck passes and deck registration that are uncounterable, I think we're probably moving on.
Yeah, got to get those runner files in there.
Yeah, multiple. We got these forces. Yeah, all right, run a foul. Okay, you win. Yeah, and once again, this is just like we talked about so much. When you get these great players, they really want to make sure, hey, I don't want to lose to something stupid. I'm here to play Magic today. I can take this extra 30 seconds and make sure I think through that extra 1% that I could get by looking at these cards. Despite I think everyone kind of knowing hey, it's kind of over, but there's no reason to lose really as far ahead, especially with this Grafdigger's Cage in play. And we do see Newton scoop it on up, go to game 3, take his game on the play here. Back to the sideboard. I don't think Newton saw anything that's really that surprising. Open deckless tournament, so the Pyroclasms are going to be there. Also, it's kind of a thing that we see traditionally from the Sneak and Show decks. So, Newton probably not going to change up too much. I don't think anything was really insightful there. Maybe Mindbreak Trap. You see the Lotus Petal draw. You got to go to Mindbreak Trap, get them.
It's very good in those situations. Yeah, it's a little unfortunate that if they go, land into next an Ancient Tomb, Show and Tell, your Mindbreak Trap looks pretty feeble at that point. So it would not shock me to see it in the deck, but it's a very hit or miss card, as opposed to stuff like Thoughtseized, Gaddock, which kind of does what it says on the tin.
100%. Meanwhile, for JP, I can't imagine, didn't get to see much from Newton, and JP as someone who's played this deck so much is going to, be used to kind of knowing what sideboard cards are going to get bring in versus not, right? So not going to be surprised by Gaddock. We're down here on the table. Newton has the Mindbreak Trap, is ready to game.
And JPA has a card I don't think we saw in that game and didn't really mention, which there are a lot of decent targets for that one in this matchup. You can hit the Caracas directly. You can hit the Elvish Reclaimer that might threaten to get it at some point. You can hit the Fiend Artisan, which we saw do such good work in game 1. But the nice thing there is Fiend Artisan just still really big, and that's primary mode a lot of the time.
We might just see a couple creatures get played here, and then Pyroclasm them up, and then excuse me, I'm so sorry. And then we see Fiend Artisan come down, boom, stabilize the table. So what to see here, with the Green Sun Zenith into the Dryad Arbor. It's interesting. If we rip a Cradle off the top, we could see some crazy stuff happening turn 2.
We might be gaming. At that point, JPA might wish they had. We'll
Honestly,
see how this next turn develops.
Yeah, Mindbreak Trap's a real leader. See Preordain here, trying to sculpt the hand. We found the Emrakul, so we had the Sneak Attack Emrakul lined up now. Now it's just about getting to that point in the game. And
so is a little interesting. So once you see Newton use that first Zenith to find the Dryad Arbor, do you then infer something about, well, maybe Newton must have a second one? Because like that line of Zenith fatigue, but honestly Zenith for, a heritage druid or something, or a claimer can be so powerful.
Yeah, I think so. That might be something that jumps to your mind. I think, especially before you see this glimpse, maybe if something else had happened this turn, you'd be like, oh, there's like another Zenith. Maybe I need to kind of wait on this Pyroclasm. But I think when you see the Zenith and kind of the land drop here, it's like, oh, okay, we're just kind of missing lands. Let's move on. But it is one of those things they know if we had drawn a basic and just kind of played the Fiend Artisan, it might have been a big, turning point for JPA holding onto that Pyroclasm. As is, just going to take, our clean 2-for-1 and reset the land. We did drop a Seiju.
Yeah, JPA sensing weakness. They're very happy to fire off that Pyroclasm. Now, so we saw last time Newton played the Glimpse. If that first Glimpse draw hits a land, we become second. Birch Lobby draw another card, and then probably the chain stops there. Maybe we get to use that Birch Law mana to cast something else. But I think Newton was happy catching in that Glimpse for at least one card. You're just cycling it. Maybe you shots to something else. You hit the cradle and you go gangbusters from there.
Yeah, 100%. We see JPA here draw Pyroclasm, so we can show and tell in an Emrakul and just be pretty happy. You could also Pyroclasm. Looks like we're going to do the preordain after we fetch here in order to just Pyroclasm and then sort of pave the way for the show and tell. And looks like it's actually going to be sneak attack since we do City of Traders. And that should do it.
Yeah, well, when you have Testacular, known Elves expert and Newton in the same tournament, you can start to make some pretty hard.
Yeah, these hard metagame reads are so important.
Yeah, packing your sideboard with Pyroclasms for the Elves matchup is hateful but effective.
It's also really good against the Moon Stompy decks, right? Like if their plan is to, Blood Moon you out, like, hey, there's that going on. And then we also have some D&T experts. So, Pyroclasm, already a card we already seen this. The third one really makes a lot of sense here. And I have a sneaky story to tell you about this time Emrakul came in. We even have the double activation if we had some, force negation nonsense or something crazy.
Now, this could be one of those 1 in 1,000 games where JPA just bricks on the creature for like 12 turns, and Newton's able to worm his way back in. I imagine this will be over before too long here. Yeah,
I can't imagine too much. We talked about the fail rate on creatures. Oh, the crop rotation a turn late would have been so powerful. Obviously, Sneak Attack would have got through it, but still, Austin such a game-winning card here. And see Sorcerer Spyglass, probably honestly names like a fetch land. Just whatever fetch land you have 4 of.
This is honestly the hidden mode to Simian Spirit Guide in this deck, is when you get into spots like this, you just draw this 2-turn clock that's likely to go the distance.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. So we'll have to see here what's going to happen. If you're Newton, you're just praying basic force every single turn here into, honestly, Fiend Artisan. We keep talking about it, like Fiend Artisan would just be keyword huge and get the game over with immediately.
Yeah, the theory behind it didn't make too much sense to me. I think it's really onto something.
Yeah, definitely 100% there. They're trying to silence you, Dom. They're cutting your voice out whenever you speak the truth about Fiend Artisan. I see it. I know we got WotC staffers watching the chat. They're trying to keep the truth down about Fiend Artisan. Anyways, here we see, looks like JPA is just double checking the deck list, making sure we named the best single Sorcerer Spyglass. Like we mentioned, you want to make sure you don't give up any sort of value. There's no reason to have one of those stupid things like, oh, I would have won $300, but I just didn't think, and I named, Misty Rainforest, and they had 4 Wooded Foothills, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's one of those frustrating things where, in theory, you're meant to, like, diversify needle effects or what have you. In reality, like, if I'm sleeping in a paper Pexi deck, I'm not going to go to the other room and, like, get my Vertical Catacombs to my other deck so that I have the right mix. But I know that I'm running a risk that, something like that could happen to me.
100%. Looks like Newton fired off a Green Sun Zenith. We already had lost with Dryad Arbors. The Pyroclasm was so traumatic for Newton that he just pushed it to the back of his mind. Totally understandable. You have to cope how you can, my friend. Don't worry about that at all.
Throw it into the void. Yeah.
Yeah. And, maybe we wanted to shuffle, try and get a land top. We did name Verdant Catacomb with the Spyglass. We found a Ponder over here for JPA, so we might be able to, finally find the game ending.
Oh, there it is.
Awesome. So that is going to be JPA moving on to our finals. Congratulations, Newton, on making top 4 with a great run with the innovative elves deck in a format where we thought maybe this elves deck would not be the way to go. We thought maybe you want to be quicker, maybe you don't have all the tutor targets and everything that you needed with Fiend Artisan, thanks to the supplementary products. But Newton's saying, hey, no, this is just good enough. It does its thing. We don't need to have all the fancy tools. That just makes it a real shining star. We are going to check out our other match if it's still going. It was the Blood Moon Stompy Mirror match. So I can only imagine that is the most exciting type of match we can see. It's going to be super cool to see kind of how we navigate our Goblin Rabble Masters against each other. Dubious Squee Monarch? Uh-oh. That's like Uro, basically, in that matchup.
Yeah, I like how we have the 9th Goblin Rebel Master effect now. We go all the way from 2014, I think, when we got the first one, to the present day. We're kind of spanning that entire time.
Yeah, 9 Rebel should be the name of this deck. I think that's the best way to describe it. I kind of like that. Dubious Squee Monarch, we're joking right now. That card is nice. It's resilient to removal. It gives you another one of those effects, and actually it having haste weirdly comes up a lot. Like obviously the tokens of all the other Rabble Master effects had haste to come in, but that one coming down and just attacking for essentially 3 does matter, especially when we talk about those removal decks, which it's so strong against. So really cool to see cards from Dominaria United making an impact here, even in this Heritage format where you'd expect maybe more of them to show up. No Leyline bindings today. The elusive Leyline binding deck still isn't found while in Heritage.
Funny about that. I was assured this was.
Yeah, you see, they're silencing you again, Dom. They're trying to keep the truth from us. I understand. They keep cutting you out whenever you speak it. We're gonna have to check in to see exactly what's going on. Yeah. Okay, so we had a little bit. There was maybe some problems with the MTG UI. Yeah, we're gonna cut to break and we'll be back in maybe 2 minutes here with our Mono Red Prison Mirror.
Right, yeah, so we're back, and it sounds like we're not going to be able to bring Mono Red Stompy Mirror gameplay. So anyone who is here for that, I'm sorry. We will try to bring that in a future event, but we failed you for the time being, or maybe not. I'm hearing, oh my god, there it is.
All right, so we have from XJ Cloud's perspective, only it looks like, so we won't get to see the other side of the riveting matchup. But the card I was going to bring up in our pre-game, Bone Crusher Giant, does look to be doing what Bone Crusher Giant does and dominate creature matchups here. Bone Crusher Giant, just the best creature hate card, of the last 3 years, if you're into like fair games, and it's doing its work here in Legacy as well.
We mentioned this is a 9 Rebel Master deck, and we got some as well. And at 4-3 on the back end, dude, that's just card advantage. Can't draw it up any better than that.
100%. And we see, going down low here, looks like XJ does have the Ancient Tomb, and it's a little bit behind on life total because of it, but up on mana, so we're going to have to see how it works. That land is turned off. There's no life gain in these decks, so it's going to be super interesting to see how that works for the rest of the tournament. We do have the secret Fable of the Mirror. Oh no, Pyrokinesis! Oh my goodness. Okay,
no.
So Pyrokinesis just killed.
We lost it. It's all over.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I was gonna say you're gonna need to draw some sort of board wipe effect. Otherwise, this Rabble Master is gonna, keep getting in there, and we're gonna have this whole weird game come down with the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, making copies to block the Bone Crusher Giant. But Pyrokinesis clears the way, so that lines up our finals here. It is going to be Thraben U versus JPA in the finals. Mono Red Prison versus Sneak and Show. I believe Sneak and Show is on the play, which is great for them. And if you're Thraben, you have got to be a little anxious.
Yeah, JPA was hoping, I think, for Thraben to break serve in that matchup so that JPA could have the play in the finals, because you always want to be on the play, especially in Constructed, and that's true in Legacy as well. Definitely true with this mono red prison deck. I mean, maybe more than any other deck in the format.
100%, yeah. So it's super exciting to see that happen here. That matchup should be starting here in just 1 second. Those two are setting up their room. Maybe we can pull up the deck list here in a second and kind of look to see if there's anything that our mono red person can do to kind of slow them down post board. When it comes to the Sneak and Show deck, though, we do have the Pyroclasms like we talked about before. That is really good against this, like, hey, my plan is to present this quick clock and kind of throw you off. Is it going to work? Pyroclasm says, well, even if you have Blood Moon, I can still get played through that. So that's a highly impactful card here in this matchup, I would imagine, along with just, the main game plan is pretty good. And the 4 Spell Pierces look actually great, Dom.
Yeah, this is, I guess most matchups are Spell Pierce matchups. This is definitely a Spell Pierce matchup. So yeah, love those Pyroclasms. The one Echoing Truth, I imagine too, just, Chalice on 1, if you have a handful of these filtering effects can be annoying, or there are other things you want to clean up there as well. So a nice out to all of that. But yeah, otherwise, fast, consistent combo deck that doesn't care too much about a lot of the prison pieces is a great place to be.
100%. Meanwhile, on the other side for Thraben U here is on the other side of our finals. But look, battling out here for $250. It's got a very clean deck list. Look how clean this is. We got a bunch of Rabble Masters, we got some Maguses, we got some Blood Moons, we got some Chalices. Our sideboard, 2s and 4s. That's all we got. It looks like it's just kind of Pyroblast though when it comes to the sideboard, unless some weird Leyline of the Void shenanigans I'm missing out on.
No, it's just Pyroblast, and yeah, I guess that's it. It's a pretty simple strategy.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if you can steal game 1 like we saw Newton kind of do, you probably have a much better game plan of stealing game 3, assuming, game 2 kind of goes by the numbers. Just putting out like a turn 1 Trinisphere might be enough to win the matchup.
Mm-hmm.
It backed up. And 4 Bonecrusher Giant, by the way. A huge statement about that card's form.
Trinisphere is an interesting one here, because the current iterations of mono red in Legacy, that's a card which you see, 2 copies of maybe in the main deck. That's something that gets edged out for some of these other cards like more Hearses or Furies and stuff like that. Here, you just want this additional log piece, and I imagine JR and Thraben both knew, okay, there are going to be a lot of combo decks in this field. More main deck Trinispheres, best possible response to that, basically. So no surprise to see that, and that's another card which, yeah, you get that one out turn 1, turn 2. That could really slow JPA down if it's a hand that relies a lot on, brainstorm and ponder and stuff to tie the room together.
100%. We're going to have to see what happens when we get down here, though. But yeah, it's going to be just a minute. Don't worry. I got to say, I am excited for Bonecrusher Giant. I'm just a Bonecrusher Giant enjoyer, I think. I don't know what exactly it is, but, Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, I'm just about Bonecrusher Giant.
Yeah, there are definitely formats where you get to enjoy it a little more often. But kind of that's part of the charm of Legacy, right? Like sometimes these standard staples get this new lease on life after they rotate out. Bonecrusher taking its talents as far as Legacy.
100%, yeah. And, its stop effect weirdly good in a lot of weird times, right? Like sometimes being able to make it so damage can't be prevented matters for these weird hate pieces against you. They have some crazy pro red card, and the shock just kind of actually kills a lot of things in the format. A lot of things are kind of scaled around like, hey, I have a high impact, but I can't actually live through cards on Holy Heat and normal Legacy where Bolt here. That doesn't really matter. And Stomp often actually is good enough, even for Delver, which is kind of like the thing you kind of think about killing the most. Turn 2 Stomp still removes it even when flipped. So kind of cool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You often have that experience of they try to protect their thing with through a stomp, and then, or to try and in the combat that way, and then their damage does. You can feel this pregnant pause on the other side of the screen as they're figuring exactly what went wrong. And it's like, damage can't be prevented. Let's just revisit the rule section.
100. Yeah. I've definitely seen some weird stomps in response to stuff. It's really interesting. I gotta talk about something we haven't got to talk about. We're not probably going to talk about it again. There was no Delver. We had one Delver player. We had no Teamer Delver though, which I thought was that's going to be kind of we're going to have combo decks versus Teamer Delver with Chalice of the Void in the middle. That's what I thought the 3 pillars were going to be. And we originally were going to have one, like we mentioned, Brian Cook switched at the last minute when the tournament became open deck list. But no Teamer Delver is really interesting. What do you think about that, though? Do you think it would have actually held up pretty well in this sort of field?
I think it would have probably done okay. I mean, Delver always does. Like there's a flaw to how bad it can be, and even before MH2 really revolutionized Legacy, Rug Delver, Team of Delver, clean threshold, if you like, was doing pretty well, putting up very good numbers. So
I
a little
like them.
surprised. Yeah, little surprised not to see more of it. I think the issue is, especially in a small tournament where there's a lot of metagaming and people have their preferences and gravitate towards certain decks. For this field, I think people knew there's going to be a lot of combo. And without some of these supplemental set cards, you don't have your Fluster Storms, your Force Negations, and so on. You actually are a little bit more exposed to, Brian Cook is one of the best Storm pilots in the world, or you have two very good Elves players in this tournament. And yeah, okay, they don't have Allosaurus Shepherd, but you don't have some of the big threats that actually make your fair plan better in that matchup. And so you look at that, you look at Mono Red Prison, other stuff. Kind of difficult to find where your good matchups are meant to be at that point, even if your individual cards still hold up pretty well.
100%. Let's throw it down to the main feature match area and get this final started. I gotta say, makes me wonder. Jeskai Delver, Brian Braun championed for a long time. A lot of powerful cards there. Looking good, definitely silence. Anyways, we're in the feature match areas. Brought to you by Mana Traders. You can't say no to that. Thank you so much, Mana Traders, for sponsoring the tournament. Dom can't stop me if I say that. Look at these crazy hands, though. Is this turn 1 Griselbrand for the 3rd time in this tournament from JPA?
Yeah, this is a turn 1 Griselbrand on the play with Forcible backup. So study this opening sequence if you want to learn how to play this. This is how you should construct your opening hand. And yeah, we talk about sideboarding pretty quickly here, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, hey, JPA's got a baseball game later today they want to go watch. They got something going on. It's Saturday night. You're going to go clubbing with all the money you won thanks to good people at Man Traders, put it on the tournament. So no time to mess around. Good to match up. JPA thought, I'll just draw my best hand. Make it easy. The force backup is honestly just, it's almost insulting.
Cherry on top. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I had all of it. No, I had this. You didn't have a chance. I'm sorry. But, we're going to have to see, because maybe there's something crazy that can happen with, like, Blood Moon, but I don't think there's a way to actually get Griselbrand off the board. And you probably can't outrace it with the Gabble Robin Wrestler, right? Like,
7/7 I think is really big, as it turns out. So
yeah.
Also, I love that Phil is aggressively muggling to a hand that can put up any form of resistance whatsoever, and it's not going to matter. Even the actual perfect 5-card, 4-card hand totally defenseless in the face of this onslaught.
Yeah, do you know what's really showing me today is how messed up Ancient Tomb City of Traders is. Yep. Those cards are really good and really strong.
Yeah, and they are a foundational part of these strategies across the years that simply would not work without them. And these are two great examples. In such cases.
Phil, not to be outdone, puts in a Legion War Boss, which will attack into the Griselbrand due to the Goblin trigger.
That's the best part. You have to attack your.
looks like Phil's double checking his deck list. Maybe he should be really checking what his dinner reservation plans are. Maybe he can move it up a couple hours. Yeah, and then Phil concedes game 1 to JPA there. Honestly, we were joking around. Not much you can really do in those spots. We talked about this before. Sometimes just having a deck that can just burst through bad matchups is really strong. And when you encounter a good matchup, it's just gravy. Anyways, let's see what Thraben here has. And it comes to the sideboard. We have 2 Chandra Torch Defiance, 4 Pyrokinesis, 3 Pyroblast, 2 Hearse, 4 Void. Dom, anything that jumps out to you that you gotta have?
Gotta have the Pyroblast, and that's really it. And I guess beyond that, what are we cutting? Some of the... Maybe it's your boy Bone Giant. I'm sorry. It's just not what the doctor called for.
What if they draw a bunch of cards with Griselbrand and you shock them?
Okay. I could see it. I think, honestly, the Blood Moons might be worth keeping in as this desperation play, just because sometimes if you turn on a Blood Moon, they're going to have a hand that's Ancient Tomb, Scalding Tarn, and a bunch of blue cards to just kind of spin their tires for a little bit. So it's not a good plan. There is not a good plan in this matchup. This is a really bad matchup, I think. So you cross your fingers, you hope for the best.
Yeah, meanwhile, from JPA here, we have 3 Pyroclasm, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Magus, 2 Sorcerer Spyglass, 2 Stifle, 1 Echoing Truth, 1 Omniscience, 1 Pyro, 1 Red Elemental Blast. What do you like out of this matchup?
3 Pyroclasm, 1 Echoing Truth. Not even sure what to pull out because all of my cards are great. So I figure it out.
Yeah, I do want... Yeah. Maybe it's the Spirit Guide. you take Spirit Guide out, Pyroclasm them in, smack the hood of the card, and you say, "What a deck!"
Oh yeah. So hey, there's a nice hand for JPA on the draw, and it looks like this is not a keepable hand from Phil.
Yeah, Phil, if it's gonna have to mulligan and does find Spirit Guide plus Chalice and some threats. Unfortunately, you can put out the turn 1 Chalice, and if JPA or Jonathan here doesn't have much going on except cantrips, you win. But you're kind of hoping to draw a Steed Trader with the top, but maybe you just have to in this sort of bad matchup, Dom. You've been in these sort of positions before. How often, when you're in this sort of unwinnable matchups, are you willing to take these sort of high risk hands?
I like mulliganing again, yeah, because there's the immediate risk of what if I don't draw that land or whatever, and then there's the hypothetical risk of do I go to 5? Do I then have to go to 4? And weighing that out can be difficult. When you register mono red Stompy for a tournament, you're setting yourself up for some amount of that. So you can't be afraid to take these big swings and to mulligan into oblivion potentially if it comes down to that. And I think that's what this is. This is
but it's a great
with nothing left.
Yeah, Shadow Skull Smashing really saying, look, there's an upside to have me as a land in your deck. I work with Chrome Mox. And turn 1 Blood Moon, no force here from Jonathan. If Jonathan doesn't find anything, it could lock him out if, does not draw a threat. Because we do have the sneak attack, so on turn 4, assuming we draw one more land, we will have the put in the Grizzlebrand.
Yeah, so we're just slowly plodding our way towards this turn 4 sneak attack.
More enough. Just land drop by land drop, and your dog in the background hates to see it. I hate to see it, as Phil just draws land after land after land. No pressure here. Maybe if we had a Goblin Rabble Master or something on curve after that Blood Moon off the top, we would have stood a chance. But right now, it looks like we're just gonna get hit by a Grizzlebrand and then probably hit by another Grizzlebrand, if not an Emrakul.
Oh yeah, we're drawing 14 cards, and we're finding an Emrakul probably.
Yeah, and Spirit Guide coming on down.
3/3.
Or 2/2, sorry. How could you be a 2/2 for 3? Nice deck, Jonathan. Your turn. I know you kept 7 cards. Probably have nothing. We have a Grizzlebrand. We're gonna draw 14 cards. Oh, we found Emrakul. We have Emrakul plus force. I have to imagine that's good enough. And Jonathan is going to attack here for. Puts in the Spirit Guide. I love it. You have a Spirit Guide. I have a Spirit Guide. Got to get it in. This is Tron assembled over here for the Secret player, and that's it. JPA Jonathan is the winner of our Heritage tournament, crushing the field, only losing to Extra Cloud, I believe, in the whole tournament. Wow, what a showing from Sneak and Show. A deck that just we don't actually get to see that much in Legacy at all these days.
Yeah, and hey, saying JPA won Legacy tournament with Sneak and Show could have said that really at any point in the God knows how many years and being true. So no surprise whatsoever. And this seems like this was a great tournament and a great field for that choice as well. People were throwing around, hey, maybe Sneak and Show is good again. We saw Mapson pick up Sneak and Show as well for this tournament. So wouldn't have been shocked to see really any one of our 16 players pick it up. This is JPA's baby deck. He maybe plays better than anyone else in the world, and it was one of the best decks, if not the best deck for the tournament. So here we are.
Yeah, and also we just saw JPA draw like straight fire in so many spots. Someone needed, someone who didn't, and that's gonna always help too. When you pick a powerful deck like this and you've got those sort of draws, it's gonna help a whole lot. Well played from JPA. Thank you once again for Mana Traders for running this event, for sponsoring this event. Thank you Honorog for behind the scenes right now, has been doing all the sort of coverage things, making it so Dom and I can look really pretty and really smart the whole time. So thank you Honorog. If you haven't already, consider subscribing with Twitch Prime. Check below. It's free for someone to use. You might as well give it to Honorog. He's doing Legacy coverage along with normal Legacy events and all the coverage around the country. So make sure to check out supporting Honorog in any way you can. Dom, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today, spending some of your afternoon talking about Legacy. It was great to have you on the mic here today.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining me here in the booth, and thank you again, as we said, putting this whole thing together, doing all the behind-the-scenes work, really for being this one-man operation behind Magic coverage at this point. Like, he is the premier face doing this in the community. We owe him so much, and so it was an honor to be some small part of this. And thank you to all 500, 600 of you for coming out here. Frankly, much better viewing figures than I anticipated for this kind of experimental Legacy offshoot, but you turned out, and it sounded like the people in the tournament had a great time. So yeah, great day all around.
Yeah. Once again, final shout out to our sponsor, Man Traders. Thank you so much for providing the prize pool for our competitors here today. JPA won a big chunk of cash. Thank you and Yeoman for adding into the prize pool as well to help support the format. If you want to play Legacy or this Heritage format with your friends, make sure to check out Man Traders. Magic Online is the best way to play Legacy. It's affordable and cheap. You can use code LEGACYROCKS to get 10% off your first 2 months. So you want to make sure and do that if you haven't already. Man Traders, thank you so much for sponsoring this. And I think that's going to do it. I don't know what Honorog's exact plan is. Maybe we're going to host somebody who's streaming a little Legacy. That'd be kind of cool. Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for the stream. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you all around.
Yo, what's up? Okay, I think you can hear me. Oh, is this better? I don't know what's going on. Anyways, it looks like I'm moving my mouth. Yo, Mason and Dom, thank you so much. Real quick, some things that I wanted to talk about as I'm figuring out the raid for this situation. Oh, it looks like you guys are actually hearing me through Discord, which is actually criminal, but it is what it is. I'll fix it for next time. Couple things. If anyone is super smart and wants to take a look at the deck list and make some sort of like write-up or analysis, I think that'd be super interesting. I'm going to go ahead and, raid Doomwake, who's playing some Vintage and Pioneer today. But if you haven't already, be sure to hit the follow button. Got a couple events coming up soon. Hopefully, I'll be able to stream Vegas in a few weeks. Next week, there's an NRG that I'll try to be doing coverage for, and then there's the Utah event, and then DreamHack Atlanta Showdown. So that's going to be a lot of stuff going on, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun too, quite frankly. Let's look forward to all that sort of stuff. Tell Doomik I said hi. But again, for people who were watching today's event, I would love to hear your thoughts on the event. If you just like tweet or you just like, type in the Discord or like anywhere, just tag me in it. And I want to know what your initial thoughts of Heritage, the format was. Again, today's event was mostly just like a testing the waters to see if this format is actually viable. And it's honestly really good to see that we had like a diversity of decks and that, honestly, the players were very interested in playing it. I think a lot of health, like the fact that Jerry could bring Sultai and it actually looked good was kind of nice. That being said, obviously this kind of format needs a lot of time to like flesh itself out and, self-discovery kind of deal. So again, just let me know. Let me know what you think. Yeah, maybe if we had a bit more representation from Delver to see whether or not that deck can actually stand the test of time, that'd be good to know. But otherwise, hit that follow button right now, and you'll know when I'm live next. If you enjoyed this content and you want to see more Heritage content, let Mason know, let Dom know. Check them out at Mason E. Clark _ nailed it first try, and then Dom and Harvey on Twitter. All right, I'm out. Tell Devin I said hi. All right, bye.